Chapter 2064. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Li Shimin and said solemnly, "Master, I think Fengzi's method can work. Train a small team and let these guys be proficient in all kinds of martial arts and weapons in the military camp. They will undoubtedly become a thorn in our side." Li Shimin glanced at Cheng Yaojin but didn't say anything. In fact, he was also thinking about it. Fengzi's method just now could be tried. The Tang dynasty could still afford a small team of meat and there wouldn't be too much loss. It didn't matter if it failed, but if it succeeded it would be different. As old Sheng said, if this small team was proficient in all kinds of military equipment and firearms, they would definitely become a thorn in the battlefield in the future. After thinking for a while, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said, "Fengzi, your training method is really good. I'll try it when we go back and see the effect." Zhang Feng nodded, took a puff of his cigarette and said, "You should try it. I've even thought of the name of the team. It'll be called the Army Special Forces." Army Special Forces? Li Shimin lowered his head and muttered silently. He was a little puzzled and asked, "Why do you want to call it the Army Special Forces?" Zhang Feng turned to look out of the door and pointed to the open space outside with his right hand holding the cigarette. He looked sideways and said, "Land means land. The Army Special Forces are troops that can participate in any battle on land. If there is a chance in the future, I will also make the Navy Special Forces. Sea means water. Just like the Army Special Forces, the Navy Special Forces are troops that can participate in any battle on the sea." In fact, he also wanted to say the Air Force Special Forces, but after thinking about it, he held back because the hot air balloon technology was still incomplete. It hadn't been mass-produced, so it was impossible to complete air operations. However, his ideas shocked Li Shimin. He had never thought that soldiers could be used in this way. What kind of special forces were they? If that was the case, wouldn't the combat power of the Tang dynasty's army be doubled? Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said solemnly, "Fengzi, is what you said true? Do you have a specific plan?" "Of course it's true." Zhang Feng's eyes widened as if he was afraid that others would not believe him. "Of course, there is a specific plan. Don't worry, let's talk about it while eating." After saying that, he turned his head and shouted towards the door, "Old Du, remove the base of the pot and make a new pot of spicy." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziting led the servants in carrying the hot pot and quickly changed the bottom of the pot. "Lao Li, Old Cheng, come and sit down." Zhang Feng waved to the group, then found a seat and sat down. After everyone was seated, he said, "Actually, I've already formulated the plan, but I didn't write it down. Let me tell you." Li Shimin and the others nodded in unison, putting on the appearance of students listening to their teacher. Even Wei Zheng and the others looked at Zhang Feng with great interest. Although they were not very interested in military affairs, they also knew that if they wanted to rule a country, military affairs were inseparable, so they wanted to learn something from it. Zhang Feng seemed to be enjoying everyone's attention. He took a deep puff of his cigarette and said, "If it's a military camp, I suggest setting up a team of 10 people, because my original intention when I set up the special forces was to let them do things that ordinary people can't do. If there are too many people, it'll be easy to be exposed, but if there are too few people and they're not strong enough, 10 to 15 people would be just right. 10 people would be the best, with one leader and one deputy leader, and they would undergo high-intensity training every day. As for the training, you've seen it just now, and I've also told you that it'll be crueler and harsher than ordinary soldiers. You don't have to use these special forces in normal battles, but when it comes to carrying out special operations, such as assassinating the leader of an enemy country, protecting a certain high-ranking official, and so on, these people can be deployed." Hearing this, Li Shimin understood. The special forces that Feng Zi was talking about were to carry out missions that ordinary soldiers couldn't carry out. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a big deal to spend some money to raise these guys. Perhaps there would be some unexpected gains. After thinking about it, he nodded and said, "Feng Zi, your idea is useful. I'll talk to the imperial court about it later." Cheng Yaojin was delighted. He knew that Li Shimin's words meant that he agreed. Now that he was the first to know, he might be able to seize the leadership of the special forces. The more he thought about it, the happier he was. He picked up the wine pot and poured Li Shimin and Zhang Feng a cup each. He smiled and said, "Come, come, come, drink." Zhang Feng and Li Shimin looked at each other, smiled, and drank the wine in one gulp. "Right, Fengzi." Li Shimin thought of something and turned to look at Zhang Feng. "Have you prepared your plan for going to Jiangnan? Do you have any plans in mind?" As soon as he said this, everyone turned to look at Zhang Feng. They all knew that Zhang Feng was going to Jiangnan. At first, they tried to persuade him to stay, but he didn't want to. Now that he insisted on leaving, they naturally cared about what would happen after he went to Jiangnan. Chapter 2065. Zhang Feng put down the wine bowl and glanced at the crowd. With a solemn expression, he said, "I heard that the prices in Jiangnan have risen a lot. I plan to go over and stabilize the prices first." Li Shimin picked up a peanut and put it into his mouth. He asked curiously, "Then what are you going to do?" "The rising prices should be caused by the clans. They want to suck the blood of the people. If you want to stabilize the prices, you are undoubtedly cutting off their source of income. I'm afraid it's a bit inappropriate to go against them as soon as you go, right?" "That's right." Wei Jing stroked his white beard and nodded. "The clans have been entrenched in Jiangnan for a long time. Fengzi, you should go over now to develop your power. You shouldn't go against them immediately. Otherwise, I'm afraid." At this point he laughed bitterly. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. In fact, he was not from the clans, but he had interacted with many clans before, so he was quite familiar with them. He deeply understood that the clans were deeply rooted in the Tang dynasty, especially in Jiangnan. If Zhang Feng suddenly attacked the clans like this, it would probably bring about unspeakable consequences. However, Zhang Feng did not seem to care. He smiled and said, "I understand what you're saying. However, think about it. Who will suffer the most when the clans raise the prices?" "Of course, it's the people," Li Shimin said without hesitation. As the ruler of a country, he was naturally familiar with the strategies of governing a country. The clans were the ones in power, and once the prices were raised, the people had no way of doing anything. This was because these things were all controlled by the clans, and the people could only pay a high price to buy the necessities of life. Naturally, the money would fall into the hands of the clans. Zhang Feng nodded. His face darkened as he said, "Lao Li, you're right. The clans are powerful in Jiangnan, but they exploit the people all year round. Just this time, they raise the prices to suck the blood of the people. I believe that the people dare not say anything to these clans. Therefore, I'm going over this time to win over the hearts of the people and help them stabilize the prices. This way, I can win over a portion of the people's hearts. Secondly, I can take the opportunity to develop my power. Thirdly, I can suppress the arrogance of the clans." Li Shimin nodded. He felt that this method was not bad, but he soon felt that something was wrong. He said, "Fengzi, the people of Jiangnan have been bullied by the clans for a long time. This is not wrong, but how can you guarantee that you can subdue them? Make them stand on your side? Moreover, the clans will not let you go." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "I don't care about the commoners standing on my side. I just want the commoners to not help the clans. In any case, we should try our best to mobilize the power of the masses. If we really can't mobilize them, then we should tell them not to stand on the side of the clans. As for the clans, they aren't scary at all. Think about it, the reason why a clan is prosperous is because of the number of talents that come out. For a large clan like the clans, there are countless talents in their ranks. Weakness?" Zhang Sun Wuji was a little puzzled. How could there be a weakness when the clan was big? Didn't everyone hope that the bigger the clan, the better? Only then could they ensure the prosperity of the clan. Why would Fengzi say that? The reason why he had these questions was because he belonged to a big clan. Although it was not considered a clan, he was still a relative of the royal family. Until now, he still did not know about the shortcomings of the clan. Now that Fengzi said it, he could not help but ask, "Fengzi, you just said that a big clan has a fatal weakness. What is the weakness you are talking about?" As soon as his voice fell, the people present who were deep in thought turned their eyes to Zhang Feng. In fact, they were also thinking about this question because in everyone's eyes, a big clan was undoubtedly a great thing. This way, more talents could be left for the clan. Zhang Feng smiled, shook his head, and said, maybe in everyone's eyes, a big clan is a great thing and there are no disadvantages, but in my eyes, it is different. Everything has advantages and disadvantages, even a big clan is no exception. Think about it, if a big clan is big, there will definitely be more people. With more people, the clan will definitely be difficult to manage. Many people will start to have disloyalty, and everyone's strength will not be in one place, so the clan will be easier to be defeated by others. Li Shimin turned his head and glanced at the crowd. He should have the most right to speak on this matter. Not to mention the other branches of the Li family, just the imperial family alone seemed to be in line with Fengzi's words. With more people, many people will start to have disloyalty. Back then, didn't eldest brother and third brother ostracize him? Otherwise, why would the Xuanwu Gate incident happen? Thinking about it carefully, Fengzi's words did make some sense. Wei Zheng and the others also lowered their heads in silence because they all remembered some of the things they had dealt with in the past, such as the eldest son and the second son fighting for property, the first wife and the concubine fighting for favor, and so on. These things combined with what Fengzi said seemed to be true. Chapter 2066. Looking at the way everyone lowered their heads, Zhang Feng smiled and said, you should all have some experience, right? Therefore, for a big family like the clan, the internal conflicts must be very serious. When the time comes, we can take advantage of this. Li Shimin nodded and said, Fengzi, you can grasp this point yourself. I believe you should be able to do it, right? Zhang Feng nodded slightly, took a deep puff of his cigarette and said, of course, that's not a problem. Although I don't have 100% confidence in the clan, I will make them have an easy time. That's good. Li Shimin smiled, picked up a piece of braised meat, and said with a smile, you don't just use these methods to suppress prices, right? Lao Li, you know me well. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder, then poured a glass of wine for the latter and said with a smile, come, let's talk while drinking. After drinking the wine, Zhang Feng wiped the corner of his mouth and continued, you also know that Jiangnan is an important port. I plan to open up the water transportation in Jiangnan to Chang'an and the whole country. Water transportation? Li Shimin was a little absent-minded. He vaguely remembered the scene of Emperor Yang of Sui dynasty building the Grand Canal. At that time, countless men in Jiangnan were used by Yang Guang as laborers and then used as coolies to build the Grand Canal. At that time, this project could be said to have caused the people's resentment to boil. Countless people died tragically because of the construction of the Grand Canal. Fortunately, with the help of countless working people, this unprecedented canal was built, and Yang Guang also paid a painful price for his tyranny. However, this canal played an important role. From Yuhang, now Hangzhou, in the south to Zhujian, now Beijing, in the north, all the people along the river benefited. However, Fengzi said that if he wanted to open up the water transportation, he had to go through the Grand Canal, and he had to have his own boat to pass through the Grand Canal. This was not a small amount of money, but first of all, the clan occupied the riverbed. Would they let Fengzi pass through the Grand Canal? He was puzzled and asked, Fengzi, I have no objections to you opening up the water transportation. After all, water transportation is the fastest method of transportation. However, the Grand Canal has always been the territory of the clans. Why would they agree to let you open it? Zhang Feng took a sip of wine and said with a smile, of course the clan won't agree to let me get through, because this will harm their interests. However, if I ask them to split the profits, they will definitely agree. Li Shimin was even more confused. Didn't Fengzi want to get rid of the clan? Why did he have to give the clan a share? Wasn't this cutting off his own path of retreat? He could only ask, why do you want to give them a share? What you're doing is encouraging their arrogance. Sharing is a plan for the future when there is no other way. Zhang Feng sighed and said, think about it. If I establish a force there, I will naturally not give them a share. However, if the force is not completely established, if I don't give them a share, they will definitely not agree to let me open up the waterway. However, if I give them the waterway with the greedy character of the clan, they will definitely agree. Of course, the share is not for nothing. After it is completely opened in the future, I will naturally take it back. Hearing this, Li Shimin finally understood. This was a typical example of burning the bridge after crossing the river. However, this idiom was not suitable for Zhang Feng. It could only be said to be a blow to the clan. After all, those guys were used to being tyrannical in Chang'an. They should have been like this long ago. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Feng Zi, you're right. I support you. I, old Cheng, also support you." Cheng Yaojin grinned and picked up a jar of wine. He smiled and said, "Come, drink." Zhang Feng also raised his wine glass and bumped into Cheng Yaojin's, drinking in a mouthful. "Sai, Feng Zi, since you're going to Jiangnan, bring our Tainyo with you." Cheng Yaojin turned his head and patted Cheng Chumo's shoulder. Then, he turned his head to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Tainyo has been strong since he was young. If he goes with you, he might be able to help you. At the same time, you can also let this stinky brat gain some knowledge." These words were from the bottom of his heart. Before Cheng Chumo met Zhang Feng, he was a little devil. He spent his days fighting with grasshoppers, gambling, going to brothels, and flaunting his prowess on the streets. Anyway, as long as it was a bad thing, this brat had done it all. He even fought with Zhang Sunchong and Fang Yai, who were called the Four Tyrants of Chang'an. He had beaten them many times, but he couldn't beat them every day. If he didn't beat them, this brat would go out to drink and have fun. However, once he met Zhang Feng, this brat seemed to have changed. He was not like before and was even more obedient. Therefore, he really wanted Zhang Feng to bring this brat to Jiangnan to gain some knowledge. Secondly, Zhang Feng could help educate him. Seeing this, Li Shimin's heart was also moved. This was because he also wanted Zhang Sunchong to go to Jiangnan. Zhang Sunchong was his nephew, a standard royal relative. Usually, he was a treasure in Zhang Xuan's family. Zhang Sun Wuji was afraid that he would melt in his mouth and break in his hands. This also led to this brat's arrogant and despotic character. He was like Cheng Chumo, but more serious than Cheng Chumo. He also changed because he met Zhang Feng. If this brat also went to Jiangnan, perhaps he would change. At least, he would be much better than before. Chapter 2067. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Fengzi, why don't you bring Buggy along as well?" As he spoke, he saw Du Go, who had dodged to the side, and hurriedly said, "And Dabing, why don't you bring all three of them along?" The moment he said that, Zhang Sun Wuji shuddered. He knew how dangerous Jiangnan was. Although it was known as the land of fish and rice, with countless talents and beauties, there were also many clans. If something happened to his son, what would he do? Especially since Zhang Sunchong was the only son of the Zhang Sun family. If he was gone, then the entire Zhang Sun family would be gone. At this moment, he really wanted to refute, but thinking that this was what Li Shimin had said, he held back. He could only look at Zhang Feng with a pleading expression, hoping that he would not let his son go to Jiangnan. Du Ruhui, on the other hand, did not think much of it. This was because the Du family had always been very strict. If his son was useless, he would be too embarrassed to meet others. However, Du Go was a little disappointing. He hung around Cheng Chumo and the others every day. If he went to Jiangnan with Fengzi, it would not be a bad thing. Moreover, the Du family had more than one son. Du Go still had an older brother. What was there to be afraid of? However, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said helplessly, "It's not that I don't want to bring Tainyo and the other two to Jiangnan, but I can't. If too many people go, it will easily attract the attention of the Jiangnan clans. If Tainyo and the others stay in Chang, and they can help me attract some of the clan's attention. Moreover, they won't be of much help even if they go. Most importantly, I've given them an important task." Li Shimin frowned and glanced at Cheng Chumo and the others. He asked in surprise, "What task did you give them?" "Steam engine." Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd, but when he saw the puzzled look on their faces, he could only explain, "It's a machine that uses steam as the raw material and can generate power. In the future, it can be used on cars and ships." Li Shimin turned to look at Du Ruhui and the others, but the latter acted as if they had never heard of it before. However, he had never heard of it before, so he could only ask, "Fengzi, can that thing you mentioned really work? Using steam as a raw material? Why haven't I heard of it before?" I can't explain it to you in a short time. Zhang Feng curled his lips and helplessly said, all you need to know is that this thing will be used on ships in the future. Right now, Iron Bull and the others are working on it. That's why I asked them to stay. Hearing this, everyone was confused. However, they finally understood why Iron Bull and the others could not go. They had to stay in Chang'an and to research something important. Fengzi, if you don't bring Tai Niu and the others, who will you bring? Who can keep you safe? Li Shimin turned to look at Zhang Feng and asked with a puzzled look. Didn't you see it just now? Zhang Feng glanced at the front yard and smiled. Those training guards in the front yard are the people I'm going to bring to Jiangnan, as well as Yu Yao and Jingshu. Hearing this, Li Shimin understood. No wonder this kid wanted to train these guards to death. It turned out that he was going to bring them to Jiangnan. However, why did he have to bring Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu with him? Needless to say, Jingshu had a special identity, so it was fine to take her with him. However, Zhang Yuyao was a little different. This girl was a lady from a respectable family. If she went to Jiangnan with Fengzi, thinking about this, he looked at Zhang Feng and said solemnly, Fengzi, I don't mind if you let Jingshu go to Jiangnan with you. After all, she has a special identity. However, how can you let Zhang Yuyao go with you? At this time, Zhang Feng really wanted to shout out that he was wronged. It was obviously the two girls who wanted to go. He quickly explained, it's not that I want them to accompany me. It's these two girls who want to accompany me. I tried to persuade them for a long time, but it was useless. These guards are here to protect them. Li Shimin was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. It turned out that the two girls wanted to go with him? Did Zhang Yuyao not care about her reputation? She was not married to Fengzi yet. If she went to Jiangnan, she would definitely be ridiculed. However, this girl was so infatuated that she would rather be ridiculed than go with Fengzi to Jiangnan. However, what Fengzi did was too honest. Even if this girl wanted to go with him to Jiangnan, he had to make some arrangements. At the very least, he had to give her a status. Thinking of this, Li Shimin put on the look of an elder and said solemnly, Fengzi, even if the girl of the Zhang family wants to go to Jiangnan with you, you can't just accept it like this. At least give her a status. Otherwise, when she goes to Jiangnan, how much ridicule will she bear? How about this? Before you go to Jiangnan, you have to get married first. As long as you two get married, no one will gossip. That's right. I think it's okay. Cheng Yaojin grinned. He liked these festive things. He smiled and said, Fengzi, you have no parents. Let us make the decision for this wedding for you. Chapter 2068. Everyone present nodded. They were all people who knew Zhang Feng better. They were his relatives and friends. They had been worried about Zhang Feng's marriage. They had thought of many ways to make him get married, but Zhang Feng always found an excuse to refuse. This time, Li Shimin was present, so they naturally had to help. Besides, Zhang Feng was not young anymore. Children of his age were old enough, but he was still a virgin. It was really troublesome. Zhang Feng naturally understood everyone's thoughts, but as a modern person he had always been disgusted with arranged marriages. It was not that he did not like Zhang Yuyao. After getting along with her for such a long time, even if there were no feelings, there would be feelings. It was just that he really did not like this. There was also the system. From the beginning until now, the system had not been awakened. He had been looking forward to the day when the system was awakened. When the system was awakened, it would not be too late to get married at that time. After thinking about it, he shook his head and said, I know your good intentions, but I have no intention of getting married now. The Jiangnan clan has not been eliminated, and the Zhang family has not been promoted. I really have no intention of getting married. He did think so. Now the clan regarded him as a thorn in their flesh. If he got married, it would harm Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu. Moreover, he also wanted to revive the Zhang family. Now the Zhang family had some reputation in Chang'an, but it was not enough in the Tang dynasty, so he still did not want to get married. However, Li Shimin was not willing. He looked at Zhang Feng with a serious face and said, Fengzi, think about it. Zhang girl is not afraid of being ridiculed by others, but she still wants to go to Jiangnan with you. If you don't give her a status now, won't you disappoint her? The most important thing is, if you leave, how can Zhang Yuyao's parents establish themselves in Chang'an? Their daughter going on a long journey with another man is not pleasant to hear. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others? Zhang Feng was speechless for a while. He didn't want to hurt Zhang Yuyao's feelings, because the two of them were previously engaged and could be considered as an unmarried couple. Even if they went to Jiangnan, it was okay to attract some gossip. Anyway, he didn't care. But Zhang Yuyao might feel a little uncomfortable. But since they had decided to go to Jiangnan, it should be fine. However, he really didn't think about Zhang Yuyao's parents. If he left, what would happen to Zhang Yuyao's parents? Although the people of the Tang dynasty were much more liberal, there were still some conservative ideas. If they left, the people in Chang'an would definitely point fingers at Zhang Yuyao's parents. The only way was to take Zhang Yuyao's parents away, but this method was obviously not suitable. Then, he could only settle them down when he went to Jiangnan, visit them first, and fix his and Zhang Yuyao's status. After thinking about it, he turned to look at Li Shimin and said helplessly, "I really didn't think of it just now. But fortunately, you reminded me." Li Shimin was delighted. This kid finally understood. It seemed that he was finally getting married. Just as he was about to ask if they were going to get married, Zhang Feng's words surprised him. "When I leave, I'll help Yuyao's parents settle down. I'll also fix my relationship with Yuyao again. I promise that Yuyao's parents won't worry." Li Shimin really wanted to curse at this moment. Lao Tzu wanted him to get married. After thinking about it, he held back and put on a sincere expression. "Fengzi, do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand? I said this because I want you to get married as soon as possible, preferably before you go to Jiangnan." Among all the people present, he and Zhang Feng had a deep relationship. It could be said that they were friends despite the difference in age. Therefore, he hoped that Zhang Feng would get married and leave a bloodline for the Zhang family. However, this guy didn't understand no matter how he persuaded him, which made him very annoyed. Zhang Feng naturally understood Li Shimin's intentions, but he already had a plan in mind. He could only say, "Lao Li, I understand your intentions, but I don't want to get married now. Besides, getting married now won't do me any good." "No good?" Li Shimin was a little confused. How could there be no good in getting married? Getting married could carry on the family line. You could also do some things that you didn't want to do but had to do. There were so many benefits, but this guy said there were no benefits? He laughed. At this moment, he thought that Fengzi was really a child. How could he say such things? However, he didn't get angry. He only asked with a playful expression, "You just said that getting married won't do you any good. Then tell me the reason. If the reason is sufficient, then I won't force you." Zhang Feng smiled. He picked up a bowl of wine and took a sip before saying, "First, I am now on the opposite side of the 5 surnames and 7 expectations. In other words, I am now their enemy. If I get married now, the people around me will definitely face more or less danger. What kind of bullsh*t reason is that?" Cheng Yaojin glared at Zhang Feng with an indignant expression. How powerful can the people of the 5 surnames and 7 expectations be? Lao Tzu doesn't believe that they will dare to touch the people around you after you get married. Chapter 2069. He had always disliked the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes because they bullied others. Of course, part of it was because of the tigress at home. His wife was also a woman of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, and she was a top surname of Cui. For various reasons, he did not have a good impression of the clan, especially the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Li Shimin glanced at Cheng Yaojin with disdain. He was obviously afraid of the Cui family at home, but now that he was out of the house, he began to boast that he was not afraid of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. But disdain was disdain. In fact, he still agreed with Cheng Yaojin. No matter how bold the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were, they still did not dare to enter Chang'an. However, if they were out of Chang'an, it would be different. So, Zhang Feng's words were somewhat reasonable. So, he could only say, "Fengzi, continue. Don't pay attention to this fool." Zhang Feng knew Cheng Yaojin's temperament, so naturally, he was too lazy to care. He lit a cigarette and continued, "Second, I am now in the development stage of my career. It is not suitable for me to get married at all. Otherwise, it will distract me. Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Zhang Feng. What kind of reason is that? Continue. Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly. In fact, this was something that he had forcibly put together. Otherwise, he would have to face Lao Li's forced marriage. In fact, his real reason was the system, but how could he dare to say this to everyone? So he had to lie. Also, I want to glorify the Zhang family. Now that the Zhang family is in decline, I can't go on like this. Most importantly, I want to create a perfect world for the world. Perfect world? Li Shimin was interested and asked curiously, what does the perfect world look like? Zhang Feng picked up the wine bowl and took a sip. There was a trace of a proud smile on his lips. Last time, I told Xuanzang. Since you want to hear it, I will say it again. It is that there is no dispute in the world, no difference in culture, no entanglement between people. Choose the virtuous and the capable, and speak of faith and harmony. Old friends do not only have relatives, but also have children. So that the old have a purpose, the strong have a purpose, the young have strengths, the lonely and disabled, all have a purpose. There was a place for men and a place for women. Evil goods should be discarded from the earth, and should not be hidden from oneself. Evil strength should not come from the body, and should not be hidden from oneself. You are deliberately keeping your schemes closed and not prospering, stealing and rioting but not doing it, being an outsider but not closing your doors. Li Shimin felt that something was wrong and hurriedly said, "Didn't you say Elysium last time?" Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. He had been seen through by this guy, but his face remained calm. That was just to fool Xuanzang. Anyway, the meaning is the same. I'll only get married after I've completed all of this. Li Shimin's eyebrows jumped, and he hurriedly said, "When will this be completed? If we don't complete it, won't we never get married?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and said indifferently, "Yes, we won't get married if we don't finish it now." It didn't matter whether Lao Li believed him or not, as long as he didn't force him to get married. Li Shimin naturally saw some clues and didn't want to continue to force him. He could only say, "Forget it, I don't want to care about your marriage, but you must take care of the matter of going to Jiangnan. Don't let the Zhang family be ridiculed." Zhang Feng nodded. When he was talking about Zhang Yuyao's parents, he already had a plan in mind. Naturally, he wouldn't make things difficult for Zhang Yuyao's parents. "But, Master?" At this moment, Du Ziding's voice came from outside the door. Zhang Feng looked up and saw Du Ziding running in quickly. "Master, there's a worker outside the door asking to see you. He said that the potatoes you planted are ripe, and he brought a bag over." "Really?" Zhang Feng was overjoyed. He suddenly stood up and wanted to run out of the door. In a moment, he was outside the door and saw a worker carrying a bag. Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Open the bag and take a look." Hearing this, the worker hurriedly opened the bag because he knew that this was the boss's house. He saw the bag open and the round potatoes inside appeared in front of him. Zhang Feng's eyebrows raised in joy. He grabbed a potato and weighed it in his hand. This potato was at least 8 taels to 1 caddy. It was basically the size of 3 fists. Such a big potato was enough for a family to eat. Of course, it wasn't all potatoes. "Old Du, immediately send these potatoes to the kitchen and cut them into slices. Then send them to the hall." Zhang Feng happily handed the potatoes to Du Ziding. "Yes, master." Du Ziding took the potatoes and turned to leave. Zhang Feng turned to look at the worker. "Go to the accounts room to get some money and go back first. Tell your leader that I'm going to take a look later." The worker nodded and turned to leave. Zhang Feng also walked to the hall. As soon as he entered the door, he laughed and said, "Lao Li, I'll give you something good to eat later." Li Shimin turned his head with a puzzled expression. "What good thing?" Zhang Feng chuckled. "You'll know soon enough." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziding walked in with a servant carrying a plate. On the plate were the slices of potatoes. Li Shimin looked at the plate with a puzzled expression. "What's inside?" Chapter 2070. Although he had heard Feng Zi talk about potatoes before, he had never seen them, let alone cut them into slices. Zhang Feng took the potatoes from the servant's hand and looked around at everyone with a proud face. "These are the potatoes I mentioned before. Now they have been cut into slices." "These are potatoes?" Cheng Yaojin exclaimed and stared at the potato slices with his eyes wide open. He had heard Feng Zi say that potatoes could yield 1,000 caddies per moo and 2 caddies per year. At that time, he didn't believe it. Now, looking at the potato slices in front of him, he instantly doubted it. Zhang Feng enjoyed Cheng Yaojin's surprised look. He strode forward, put the potatoes on the table, and said with a smile, "Look, these are the potatoes that can yield 1,000 caddies per moo." Li Shimin picked up a potato slice, his heart full of doubts. Could this thing really yield 1,000 caddies per moo? Although he had heard Feng Zi say it before, he inevitably had some doubts in his heart. So he had to ask, "Feng Zi, can this thing really yield 1,000 caddies per moo? And it can be harvested for 2 seasons?" Zhang Feng nodded solemnly. "Of course, when have I ever lied to you about such an important thing?" Li Shimin fell silent. He was sure. Feng Zi had never lied about such an important thing. Wouldn't that be the good news for the people of the Tang dynasty? Would the people of the Tang dynasty not have to starve in the future? Would the soldiers in the barracks have food? Thinking of this, he hurriedly said, "Feng Zi, where are you planting the potatoes? Take us to have a look." Cheng Yaojin pulled Zhang Feng and said eagerly, "Let's go, Feng Zi. Let's go and have a look." "I know you want to have a look." Zhang Feng smiled, then shook off Cheng Yaojin and pointed to the potato slices on the plate. "It's not too late to have a look later. Don't you want to taste the potatoes?" Originally, everyone was still immersed in the joy of the potatoes, but after Zhang Feng said that, everyone's eyes moved to the plate. "That's right, I can take a look at the potatoes later. Now that the potato slices are right in front of me, if I don't try them, wouldn't I be letting myself down?" "Try it?" Cheng Yaojin looked at Li Shimin and asked. Li Shimin was also a little tempted. Since Cheng Yaojin asked, it was not good to say anything. He could only say, "Let's try it. Put it in the pot." As he spoke, he picked up a plate of potatoes and poured them into the pot. Cheng Yaojin also picked up the potatoes and poured them into the pot. After a while, all the potato slices were poured into the pot. Zhang Feng's face sank. He wanted to curse. These guys poured all the potato slices into the pot, and there were still a few that hadn't been cut. He was planning to make potato stew with beef. After thinking about it, he stopped and said, "Everyone, sit down. This thing cooks quickly. We can eat it soon." "Is it?" Cheng Yaojin raised his eyebrows in joy. His chopsticks were already in the pot. He scooped up a piece of steaming hot potato slices and blew on it twice. Feeling that it was already cold, he began to eat heartily. After eating a few mouthfuls, he felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly said, "Feng Zi, didn't you say that it would be cooked soon? Why is it not cooked yet?" As he spoke, he swallowed the half-cooked potato slices one after another. "I said it would be cooked soon, but I didn't say it would be cooked now." Zhang Feng looked at Cheng Yaojin with some amusement. However, when he saw that this guy was eating half-cooked, he quickly said, "This is half-cooked. Why are you eating it?" Cheng Yaojin ignored Zhang Feng and ate even more. This was because in his philosophy, food was precious. He was a person who had experienced a great famine. Generally, he didn't know how to eat food. Even now, he was a noble. This was one of his few advantages. "Feng Zi, you don't have to care about this guy." Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin, then looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Are these potatoes cooked?" Zhang Feng said, "Oh." Then he picked up a piece with his chopsticks and tasted it. When he found that there was no problem, he said, "It's cooked. Everyone try it." As soon as he said that, everyone put their chopsticks into the pot, especially Cheng Yaojin. His chopsticks were very fast, as if he was afraid that others would snatch it from him. Everyone put the potatoes into their bowls and found that they were a little hot. They quickly blew on them with their mouths. When the potatoes cooled down, they wolfed them down. Other than Wei Zheng and the other literati who still maintained a steady appearance, Cheng Yaojin and Cheng Chumo didn't care about eating etiquette at all. Their mouths were full of oil. "Feng Zi, why does your potato taste like hot pot no matter how you eat it?" Cheng Yaojin looked at the potato on his chopsticks and seemed to be a little dissatisfied with the taste of the potato. This guy had eaten too much hot pot and always felt that he was eating something spicy. "Aren't you just spouting nonsense?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Qing Yaojin and said angrily, "If the potato doesn't taste like hot pot, what else can it taste like?" However, this was not wrong. The potato itself contained a lot of starch, so it didn't have any taste. As long as it was mixed with other seasonings, it would taste like other seasonings. Chapter 2071. Fengzi, what do these potatoes taste like? Li Shimin picked up a piece of potato and looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. He had eaten too much hot pot, so he couldn't completely taste the potatoes. The taste of potatoes is a little sweet. Zhang Feng glanced at the bottom of the pot, then looked at Li Shimin and said, "The reason why you think it tastes like hot pot is because you've eaten too much hot pot. Also, potatoes are like this. The taste depends on the seasoning you put in them." Li Shimin nodded. "So that's how it is." Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and said, "Okay, now let's go and see where the potatoes are planted." After saying that, he waved his hand and walked out of the door. Li Shimin led everyone and followed closely behind. They had been looking forward to the potatoes for a long time. The group sat in a carriage at the foot of the mountain. Zhang Feng glanced at the endless land and turned to Li Shimin. "Lao Li, look, these are the potatoes I asked people to plant." Li Shimin looked at the ground with some puzzlement, then looked at Zhang Feng and asked, "Where are the potatoes?" "The potatoes are all in the soil." Zhang Feng smiled and turned to look at the workers at the side. "Go and dig up the potatoes in the ground." As soon as he finished speaking, the workers who had been waiting for a long time moved. They held hoes in their hands and began to cultivate the soil. After a while, strings of golden potatoes jumped out of the soil. Cheng Yaojin's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He reached out and grabbed one at random and laughed. "Ha, these are F*king potatoes." Li Shimin quickly went forward and picked up a fist-sized potato from the ground. He turned to look at Zhang Feng and asked, "These potatoes are so convenient. Can they be used as military rations?" Obviously, this was the question he was most concerned about. The Battle of Chiotzi was tense and had consumed a lot of food. However, if they had such food, they might be able to alleviate the food shortage. Cheng Yaojin also looked at Zhang Feng with a solemn expression. As a military commander, he naturally attached great importance to these matters. Zhang Feng naturally knew what everyone was thinking, but it was winter now. It was already good enough that they were able to grow potatoes. How could they be used as army rations? This was simply not enough unless there was a greenhouse. With that thought in mind, he looked at Li Shimin and smiled. "The winter harvest is low, so potatoes can't be used as military rations." Li Shimin and Cheng Yaojin's hearts skipped a beat. The situation at the front lines was already tense, and they were running out of rations. If potatoes couldn't be used as rations, what would happen to the front lines? Just as the two of them were feeling despondent, Zhang Feng's voice rang out again. "Although it can't be used as rations for the army now, it can still be improved slightly." "What do you mean?" Cheng Yaojin suddenly grabbed Zhang Feng and said excitedly, "What did you mean just now?" "Let go of me first." Zhang Feng shook Cheng Yaojin's hand. Only then did the latter react. After letting go, he slowly said, "Potatoes are a spring plant. It's not suitable to grow them in winter. It's already very difficult to grow them now, so the yield is very low. However, if you want to produce more, you have to raise the temperature." "Raise the temperature?" Li Shimin was a little confused. How could they raise the temperature? It was already winter, and it was unusually cold. Did they have to change the weather? That was also impossible. After thinking about it, he had no choice but to say, "Fengzi, how can you raise the temperature?" Zhang Feng glanced at the surrounding open space, then looked at Li Shimin and said, "Actually, it's not difficult. You just have to build something like a shed and then light a fire inside. As long as the temperature inside the shed is about the same as spring, then you can plant the potatoes inside. This way, when the temperature inside the shed is raised, the yield of potatoes will naturally increase. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it." Cheng Yaojin was anxious like a child. "You think I don't want to?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin, then slowly said, "The shed needs to be covered with a layer of film. This thing hasn't been developed yet. We can only use the shed when it's developed." Cheng Yaojin hurriedly said, "Then hurry up and develop it. I'm going to Chang'an soon. How can I have time?" Zhang Feng glared at Qing Yaojin, then said, "Although I don't have time now, this thing can be given to Iron Bull to do." Cheng Chumo widened his eyes and pointed at himself in disbelief. He had been standing there watching the show, and he never thought that the topic would be about him. In the end, this Fengzi just had to talk about him. He could only ask with a confused face, "Fengzi, what can I do?" "Yes, Fengzi, what can Iron Bull do?" "You'd better give the task to someone else." Zhang Sun Wuji stood up. He glanced at Cheng Chumo, then his eyes fell on Zhang Feng. "You should give such a difficult task to Buggy." Chapter 2072. Cheng Yaojin was instantly infuriated when he heard this. So this old thief Zhang Sun didn't have good intentions and wanted to get the good stuff to his son. Although he also admitted that his son Tainyo was disappointing, he still felt a little uncomfortable when others said it out loud, not to mention that it was someone who had become an official. Especially when this person wanted to steal his son's benefits. He was instantly enraged and glared at him. "What are you saying, old man? Why can't my Tainyo do it? Make yourself clear." As he spoke, he clenched his fist and acted as if he was going to hit Zhang Sun Wuji. Li Shimin saw that things were bad and quickly went forward to stop Cheng Yaojin. He shouted, "Old Cheng, what are you doing? Stop it now." When Cheng Yaojin saw that the person who came was Li Shimin, his anger immediately reduced by half. He glared at Zhang Sun Wuji indignantly and then pushed him aside. After calming down, Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng and asked with a serious face, "Fengzi, continue what you said just now. As for who to give it to, it's not important. The most important thing is how to develop it. Tell me the method." Zhang Feng nodded and said seriously, "Actually, it's not difficult to make this film. It's a plastic product, and plastic can be made with resin. We have it in the workshop. First, we melt the resin with fire, then dry it and spread it into thin sheets of paper." Hearing this, Cheng Chumo roughly understood, because he had seen the process of dissolving the resin with his own eyes. He said excitedly, "Fengzi, I know, isn't it similar to the composite bow?" "It means that it's similar." Zhang Feng smiled bitterly and said, "But the resin has to be spread very thin." Cheng Chumo nodded and didn't say anything else. "Fengzi, our Tainyo's comprehension is not bad, right?" Cheng Yaojin hugged Zhang Feng and patted Zhang Feng's shoulder casually. Zhang Feng could only reply with a wry smile. He thought to himself, anyone can understand this, right? Iron Bull's perception is good? I really don't know where he got his face from. Fengzi, since Iron Bull understands, then why don't we leave this task to Iron Bull? Li Shimin glanced at Cheng Chumo, then looked at Zhang Feng and said, "All right." Zhang Feng nodded. Cheng Chumo was the only one suitable for this task. However, Zhang Sun Wuji was a little unwilling. He took a step forward and stared at him. "No, what about our bugs?" Zhang Feng shook his head. He really didn't know what to do with this guy. He always wanted to poke his nose into everything. He could only say, "I've arranged other tasks for Bugs and Dabing. If you don't believe me, you can ask them." Zhang Sun Wuji looked at Zhang Sun suspiciously. Zhang Sun said timidly, "Fengzi wants us to make the steam engine." Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji's competitive heart barely calmed down. "All right, since it's all arranged, then there's nothing else?" Zhang Feng glanced at everyone. Seeing that no one responded, he said, "If there's nothing else, then let's go back?" Li Shimin nodded and turned to walk back to Zhang Mansion. Everyone followed closely behind. Back at Zhang Mansion, everyone drank some wine before Li Shimin and the others left. Zhang Feng felt a little drowsy and wanted to sleep. However, he knew that he couldn't sleep now. He still had to meet Zhang Yuyao's parents. So, he shouted to the door, "Old Du, prepare some gifts. I'm going to Zhang Mansion." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziting ran in. He looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. "Master, you're going to Zhang Mansion? Do you want to ask Miss Yuyao to come along?" Zhang Feng was stunned. When he was talking with Li Shimin and the others just now, he did not think of this. Now that old Du reminded him, he remembered that if there was anything difficult to reply to when he went to Zhang Mansion later, he would still need Yuyao to do it. Thinking about it, he nodded and said, "Then let's ask Yuyao to come along." Du Ziting nodded and left. He came back in a moment, but he said with a troubled expression, "Master, a servant said that Miss Yuyao went out just now. We don't know where she went." "Went out?" Zhang Mansion was puzzled. Where could Yuyao go? Could it be that she went shopping? Or went home? After thinking about it, he still couldn't find an answer. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it. Since she went out, I'll go alone." With that, he turned and walked out of the mansion. Du Ziding went to prepare the gifts. Zhang Feng waited at the door for a moment before Du Ziding brought the gifts. Zhang Feng got into the carriage and drove directly to Zhang Mansion. Soon, the carriage stopped in front of Zhang Mansion. Zhang Feng got out of the carriage and straightened his clothes. Then, he led the servant carrying the gifts to Zhang Mansion. "Hello, young master." The servants of Zhang Mansion bowed in unison. "Good, good, good," Zhang Feng replied awkwardly. He didn't really like this title, but ever since he got engaged to Zhang Yuyao, the servants of Zhang Mansion would call him young master whenever they saw him. At first, he was shocked. Later, he slowly got used to it. However, after not coming for a long time, he didn't feel uncomfortable. "Young master, are you here to visit my master?" Chapter 2073. The leader of the guards bowed and looked at Zhang Feng with a smile on his face. Ahem. Zhang Feng deliberately coughed twice and glanced at the mansion. He nodded and said, "Not bad. Go and inform your master." The servant still had a smile on his face. He stretched out his hand and said, "Young master, my master said that you don't have to report your visit. Just enter the hall." As he said that, the servant extended his hand and said with a smile, "Young master, please enter the hall." Zhang Feng didn't want to be so close. After all, they weren't married yet. But since Father Zhang didn't want to be so formal, he didn't have to be either. He strode into the hall. After entering the hall, the servant served tea and pulled out a chair. He put on a show of hospitality before leaving. In fact, Zhang Feng wasn't used to this. He was very casual when he was in his own mansion. But when he was in Zhang Mansion, he felt a little restrained. This might be the feeling of a young master visiting his father-in-law's home. He smiled bitterly and took a sip of tea while waiting for Father Zhang to arrive. But at this moment, a burst of light footsteps and hearty laughter sounded. Ha! Before the laughter died down, a white-haired man appeared in the hall. It was Zhang Yuyao's father. He went straight to Zhang Feng and said, "Huh, nephew, you're here." Zhang Feng quickly got up and saluted, "Hello, Uncle Zhang." "Good, good, good." Father Zhang patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and smiled as he pushed Zhang Feng to the seat. "Sit, nephew." After that, he strode to the main seat and turned to sit down. He then looked at Zhang Feng and smiled. "Nephew, you're here because of the Jiangnan matter, right?" Although he stayed in the mansion all year round, he still heard about the news outside. For example, the incident with Xuanzang last time. He had specially sent a servant to inquire about it, but there were too many people and even the servant couldn't squeeze in. However, this also meant that this future son-in-law was a hero in the hearts of the people of Cheng. If the son-in-law was a hero, then the father-in-law's status would naturally rise. That was why he was happy. Zhang Feng naturally knew nothing about this. He smiled faintly. "That's right, uncle. I'm here because of the Jiangnan matter. You know that this trip is imperative, but..." He smiled bitterly. "I'm worried about Yuyao. Although Yuyao and I are engaged, I'm worried about her after she goes to Jiangnan, so..." He didn't continue because he knew that Mr. Zhang was a smart man. He didn't need to say anything more to understand what he meant. Sure enough, Father Zhang frowned at first. Then, as if he had figured something out, he laughed loudly. "So that's what you're worried about? If that's the case, you don't have to worry." This time, it was Zhang Feng's turn to be puzzled. He quickly asked, "Uncle, what do you mean?" Father Zhang didn't answer. Instead, he beckoned a servant over and whispered a few words in his ear. Then, he smiled and said, "Nephew, you can ask Yuyao when she arrives." Yuyao? Zhang Feng instantly understood. So Yuyao had come to the Zhang mansion. Since Yuyao had come to the Zhang mansion, she must have told them about the Jiangnan matter. A reasonable person like Mother Zhang should be able to understand, right? Just as he was thinking, a burst of brisk footsteps sounded. A moment later, a slim and graceful woman stood in the hall. Beside her was an attractive middle-aged woman. It was Zhang Yuyao and her daughter. Zhang Feng slowly stood up and said softly, "Yuyao?" Zhang Yuyao didn't know why, but she was especially shy in her own home. When she heard Zhang Feng call her that, her face turned red all the way to her neck. She didn't answer, only bowing slightly in return. Mother Zhang was familiar with her daughter's temperament. She pulled Zhang Yuyao behind her and reached out her hand. "Prince Zhang, please sit here. We can talk about it after sitting down." "Thank you, Auntie." Zhang Feng nodded and returned to his seat. Then he looked at Mother Zhang and said, "Auntie, I'm sure you know why I'm here this time?" Mother Zhang nodded slightly and glanced at the shy Zhang Yuyao. Then her gaze fell on Zhang Feng. She smiled and said, "Of course I know. What about Yuyao in Chang'an?" "Auntie is wise." Zhang Feng cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Auntie, although Yuyao and I are husband and wife in name, we haven't gone through the wedding ceremony. Originally, I didn't plan to take Yuyao to Jiangnan this time because it's really dangerous there. But Yuyao insists on going, so I can only go along with her wishes. But I'm worried that after we go there, people will point fingers at her and the Zhang mansion." Mother Zhang smiled faintly and turned to Zhang Yuyao. "Daughter, what do you think?" Zhang Yuyao secretly glanced at Zhang Feng and quickly covered her face with her handkerchief. Then she looked at Mother Zhang. "Mother, didn't we just discuss it? I must go to Jiangnan with Prince Zhang." Mother Zhang smiled bitterly and helplessly. A grown girl can't be kept at home. After saying that, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and smiled. "Young Master Zhang, we've just discussed it. Yuyao must go to Jiangnan with us. There's no need to argue about this. As for after Jiangnan, it's your business. There may be some gossip, but I don't think anyone knows about your relationship. It doesn't matter. As for Chang'an, you have so many good friends. What are you afraid of?" Chapter 2074. After that, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and smiled. "Prince Zhang, we just discussed it. Yuyao must go to Jiangnan with us. There's no need to argue about this. As for after Jiangnan, it's your business. There may be some gossip, but no one should know about your relationship, so it doesn't matter. As for Chang'an, you have so many good friends. What are you afraid of?" Zhang Feng was stunned. Why didn't he think of this? If he had so many good friends in Chang, and after he left, the Zhang mansion would be fine. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Mother Zhang and smiled. "Auntie, you have a point." Mother Zhang nodded slightly and glanced at Zhang Yuyao, whose cheeks were slightly red. Then she looked at Zhang Feng and said, "Prince Zhang, actually, I still hope that you and Yuyao can get married in Chang, and before leaving. After all, you are already engaged. It's not good to keep holding on like this, right? What do you think?" After that, she gave Father Zhang a look. Father Zhang immediately understood. He looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Prince Zhang, you see, our Yuyao is not young anymore. It's not good for her to run to your mansion every day. It's indeed time to consider marriage." This was also true. Although Zhang Yuyao was engaged to Zhang Feng, she was still not married. It was not nice to run to Zhang Feng's place every day. Father and Mother Zhang had been anxious for a long time. They were worried about their daughter's marriage, but since their daughter came back, she had been talking to Zhang Feng, which made them a little speechless. Now that Zhang Feng was here, they naturally had to talk about it. Faced with such a situation, Zhang Feng had never experienced it. The corner of his mouth twitched and for a moment he didn't know how to answer. This was because he didn't expect that Mother and Father Zhang would also force him to marry. This was undoubtedly a death sentence for a naive person. However, with the answers he had given to Li Shimin and the others, he felt a little more confident. Thus, he smiled faintly and said, "Uncle, Auntie, I'm preparing to go to Jiangnan to develop my career. The situation there is still unclear. It's better to wait until I come back and get married. Besides, I'm currently in the development stage of my career. If I get married rashly, I'm afraid I'll be neglecting Yuyao." Mr. Zhang and Mrs. Zhang looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they even felt that what this guy said made sense. But when he thought about it carefully, it made no sense at all. He was clearly looking for an excuse not to get married. They still wanted to dissuade him, but after thinking about it, they decided against it. This Zhang Feng looked so determined that it was impossible to persuade him. Father Zhang could only let out a long sigh and faintly said, "Since you say so, then fine. We'll do as you say." "Thank you for your understanding, uncle and auntie." Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly and cupped his hands. "Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." As he spoke, he waved his hand and the servant behind him came forward. He took the gift from the servant's hand and stood up to place it in front of Father Zhang. He smiled and said, "Uncle, this is a little token of my appreciation." Father Zhang smiled and stood up to accept the gift. "Thank you, dear nephew." Zhang Feng bowed to Mother Zhang again and said with a smile, "Auntie, I'll take my leave." Zhang Yuyao glanced at Zhang Feng. She wanted to say something but stopped. Mother Zhang had already seen through her daughter's thoughts. She smiled and turned to Zhang Feng. "Prince Zhang, wait." Zhang Feng stopped and turned to look at Mother Zhang. Mother Zhang glanced at Zhang Yuyao dotingly and stood up to look at Zhang Feng. "Prince Zhang, isn't Yuyao going to Jiangnan with you? Why don't you take her with you?" Zhang Feng originally wanted to let Zhang Yuyao rest at home for a few more days. It wouldn't be too late to delay the trip to Jiangnan for a day. Anyway, he hadn't finished his business in Chang'an. Now that he heard Mother Zhang say this, he didn't argue and said, "Thank you, Auntie." Zhang Yuyao glanced at Zhang Feng and then bowed to Mother Zhang and Father Zhang. After all, this trip to Jiangnan was hundreds of miles away from Chang'an. It was uncertain when they would come back. Naturally, they had to bid farewell to their parents. Then, Zhang Feng and Zhang Yuyao got into the carriage and drove to the Zhang mansion. In the carriage, the blush on Zhang Yuyao's face had yet to recede. Perhaps it was because her parents were by her side just now, and she felt shy. Looking at it now, it was as if the white clouds were dyed with a red blush. She raised her head slightly and glanced at Zhang Feng. Then she lowered her head and said softly, "Prince Zhang, my parents had a conflict just now. Please forgive them." Zhang Feng suddenly raised his head. He was thinking about what to do after going to Jiangnan and didn't hear Zhang Yuyao clearly. He said a little belatedly, "What did you say just now?" Zhang Yuyao saw that Zhang Feng was a little absent-minded. She said coquettishly, "Nothing." Zhang Feng nodded slightly. Then he seemed to think of something and said, "What did you and Auntie discuss just now?" "Just now, I told Mother that I would go to Jiangnan with you." Zhang Yuyao clutched the corner of her clothes and her face was a little red. Zhang Feng finally understood. No wonder his conversation with Father and Mother Zhang went so smoothly. It turned out that this girl helped him from behind. Thinking about it, he smiled and said, "Thank you, Yao." Chapter 2075. Zhang Yuyao blushed and shook her head. It was embarrassing for a girl like her to talk about this kind of thing. After all, she hadn't married Zhang Feng yet. She felt a little ashamed to speak for Zhang Feng in front of his parents. Now Zhang Feng said so, she didn't know how to answer. But at this moment, the neighing of horses came from outside the carriage and the carriage stopped. "Master, we've arrived at the mansion." A voice came from outside the carriage. Zhang Feng nodded slightly and helped Zhang Yuyao get off the carriage. "Yao, go back to your room and have a rest." Zhang Feng let go of Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile. Zhang Yuyao nodded slightly, bowed, and turned to her room. Zhang Feng also turned to the study and said to Du Ziding as he walked, "Go to the study and pour a cup of tea. And don't let anyone disturb me in the study." Du Ziding frowned. He knew that the master usually didn't go to the study. Why did he go to the study today? But seeing that the master was in a hurry, he didn't ask more. He nodded and left. Zhang Feng didn't say anything along the way. Soon he came to the study. He found a piece of paper and spread it out. Then he started to write. The year-end examination was about to begin. He needed to draw up the curriculum for the students of the academy. The students of the academy had been learning the middle school curriculum. This time he needed to draw up the college curriculum for the students. After writing for a while, Du Ziding gently pushed the door and came in. Seeing that Zhang Feng was writing attentively, he gently put the tea on the table and left. After writing for a while, Zhang Feng felt that his hands were a little sore. After all, he had rarely written since he came to the Great Tang, and most of the work was done by others. He could only rest for a while, light a cigarette, and slowly smoke it. After the cigarette went out, he began writing again. After about half an hour, the curriculum was finally prepared. Zhang Feng stood up and stretched his body. Then, he lit up a cigarette and sat down on the chair, smoking with a face full of enjoyment. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Zhang Feng stubbed out the cigarette and glanced outside the door. Who is it? Master, Mr. Zihuai is here. Du Ziding's voice came from outside the door. The old scholar? Zhang Feng, a little confused, frowned. Wasn't the academy preparing for the year-end examination? The old scholar should be very busy. Why did he have time to come to the mansion? Even though he didn't understand, he still got up and walked towards the door. Coming. Before he could reach the door, he heard the "gia" sound as the door was pushed open. A familiar face came into view. It was the old elementary scholar. Old scholar, why are you here? Zhang Feng asked subconsciously. But, can't old man. The old scholar smiled playfully and then stepped through the door. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said, the old man is looking for you. Do you think the old man is willing to come? Zhang Feng smiled and closed the door, blocking Du Ziding outside. He knew that if the old scholar was looking for him, there must be something. As expected, the old scholar found a chair and sat down. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said seriously, Feng Zi, are you ready for the curriculum after the new year? I've been ready for a long time. Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly and walked to the desk. He was about to pass the curriculum to the old scholar when he found that the ink on it was still wet. He smiled and said, take a seat first. I'll pass it to you later. The old scholar's eyes were sharp. How could he not see Zhang Feng's little movements? But he was not in a hurry, so he didn't care. He smiled and said, take a seat. I have something to ask you. Zhang Feng nodded and found a seat near the old scholar. He asked, what's the matter? The old scholar said seriously, Feng Zi, when do you plan to leave? As soon as possible. Zhang Feng waved his hand and then thought of the curriculum. He smiled and said, I wanted to leave today, but I haven't finished writing the curriculum. I just finished writing it and I want to leave tomorrow. Tomorrow? The old scholar raised his head and said a few words in his heart. He then looked at Zhang Feng and said seriously, what's the first step of your plan to go to Jiangnan? Zhang Feng was silent for a while and said seriously, the prices of goods in Jiangnan are rising. I want to stabilize them first. Otherwise, the people will have a hard time. The old scholar nodded. He was quite satisfied with Feng Zi's plan. At least he could see that this kid cared about the world. He smiled and said, not bad. This plan is not bad. At least you can win the hearts of the people. As he spoke, he glanced outside the door and then looked at Zhang Feng. With a mysterious expression, he said, Feng, I have a good friend in Chang'an. He used to be a declining aristocrat. Now, he has some coal mining business. You can ask him for help when you go to Jiangnan. Give me that piece of paper and I'll write down the address for you. Zhang Feng was happy. He needed some hidden power in Jiangnan. This old scholar was no doubt giving him a pillow when he was sleepy. He quickly took a piece of paper and a pen and handed it to the old scholar. Chapter 2076. The old scholar picked up the brush and wrote a line of small characters. Then he handed it to Zhang Feng and said, this is the address. You just need to follow this address and you will find it. Zhang Feng took the paper and glanced at it. On the paper was written, Wang Shi, living in the Wang mansion beside the Jiangnan Canal Street. After reading it, Zhang Feng folded the paper and cupped his hands. Thank you. You don't have to be so polite with me. The old scholar waved his hand and said carelessly, as long as you are safe in Jiangnan. Then he pointed to the curriculum on the table and said, give it to me. I will take it back to the academy. Zhang Feng quickly got up and looked at the curriculum. He found that the ink had dried. He handed it to the old scholar and asked, when is the end-of-year examination? The old scholar took the curriculum and glanced at it. Then he said, probably in 2 months. Zhang Feng frowned. He had originally wanted to wait until the end-of-the-year examination before leaving, but now it seemed that it was too late. The time had already been pushed back to the new year. He thought for a moment and said, Old Shiosai, I won't be able to participate in the end-of-the-year examination. You tell my teachers. The old scholar had known that Zhang Feng would say this, but hearing it with his own ears made him feel uncomfortable. He laughed and scolded, "Why don't you go and tell them yourself?" Zhang Feng smiled bitterly. If he went and told his teachers, he would be scolded to death. But he would not say this in front of the old scholar. So he said, "Aren't I leaving soon? There's no way to tell them. I'd better go and tell them." Forget it, forget it. The old scholar sighed. He knew Zhang Feng's difficulties and did not want to tease him. He smiled and said, "Okay, I will go and tell those old guys." After saying that, he turned around and opened the door, walking straight to the door. Looking at the receding figure, Zhang Feng felt reluctant to part with him. Ever since he knew the old scholar, he had been treating him like a nephew. He even sent him a friend's message before he left. This friendship was really better than that of an ordinary master and disciple. For a moment, he didn't even want to leave. But he had to go to Chang'an, because you and the clan were there. "Master, everything is ready." Du Ziting came over. Zhang Feng's thoughts were interrupted. He glanced at Du Ziting and said, "Tell them that we will leave for Jiangnan tomorrow morning. You and the servants will stay here." A complicated look flashed through Du Ziting's eyes. In fact, he wanted to go with his master, but when he heard his master's words, his mood fell to the bottom. Of course, he also knew why his master asked him to stay. The Zhang mansion was so big that no one could take care of it. Other people were not reliable, so he had to stay. At night, the sky gradually darkened. The Zhang mansion seemed to have become deserted all of a sudden. There were no longer the usual sounds of laughter and chatter. There were only lonely lights in the garden. Leaves fell from the trees, as if they were sad for Zhang Feng's departure. There was no snow tonight, but there was still a creaking sound in the courtyard. It was the sound of the servants on night patrol stepping on the fallen leaves. They seemed to be extra diligent tonight. They circled Zhang Feng's room several times, as if they were afraid that something unusual would happen. This was because they knew that their master was leaving the next morning. If they could catch a glimpse of him now, it would be good. Otherwise, they didn't know when they would be able to see him again in the future. Another reason was due to the loyalty of the servants. From the moment they entered the Zhang mansion, it was as if they were deeply tied to their master. Now that their master was suddenly leaving, they were very reluctant. The night passed quickly. Zhang Feng woke up early. When he opened the door, he saw Du Ziting standing outside. "Old Du, good morning." Zhang Feng yawned and said with a smile, "Tell all the guards to eat and then gather in the front yard. We will leave in a moment." Du Ziting nodded and left. Zhang Feng also went to the hall to eat. Unexpectedly, the two girls had already arrived. When they saw Zhang Feng, they stood up together. "Prince Zhang. Have a seat. We'll set off after dinner." Zhang Feng waved his hand to signal the two girls to sit down. He then picked up a bowl of porridge and looked at them. "The road to Jiangnan is long. You have to eat more. Otherwise, you can only eat dry food on the road." Chang'an was a few hundred miles away from Jiangnan. Although there were post stations on the way, it was impossible to have fresh food when one was hungry. Moreover, the food on the road was not as good as the food in the Zhang mansion. To put it bluntly, even the dry food in the Zhang mansion could not be compared. Therefore, it was better to eat on the way. A complicated look flashed in Zhang Yuyao's eyes. She was still infatuated with Chang. After all, she was born and raised in Guangzhou. If Prince Zhang was not going to Jiangnan, she might not leave Chang and for the rest of her life. However, since they were going to Chang, and there was nothing to say. She nodded and ate the porridge. Chapter 2077. Jingshu was a little different. She wasn't from Chang, and so she didn't have the same infatuation as Zhang Yuyao, so she was still a little disappointed. After the meal, Zhang Feng glanced at the two girls. "Go and get ready, then gather at the door. We're about to leave." After that, he turned and walked to the front yard. The guards had already gathered. There were 50 people in total, no more, no less. Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd. "Let's go." "Yes, master." Everyone spoke in unison, and their momentum was loud. Zhang Feng's lips curled up. He didn't neglect the training these days. These guys were as strong as bulls. When they reached Chang'an, they would definitely become a big killing machine. The Jiangnan clan, prepare to suffer the wrath. He strode to the door, and the guards followed closely behind. The carriage had already been prepared at the gate. Zhang Feng boarded the carriage and waited for the two girls to arrive. After a while, there was a flurry of footsteps. Zhang Yuyao walked over with big and small bags, followed by her maid Xiao Cui. Xiao Cui was also carrying all kinds of bags, and he didn't know what was inside. Zhang Feng's mouth twitched, and he suddenly felt speechless. Yuyao, we're going to Jiangnan, not to take refuge. Why are you carrying so many bags? Also, what's in these bags? Zhang Yuyao stopped and put the bags on the carriage. Then she looked at Zhang Feng and said breathlessly, these are all important things that we girls use. You don't understand. I don't understand? Zhang Feng frowned. As a modern person, what don't I understand? Although he was dissatisfied, he didn't want to argue with this girl. After all, he knew that a good man wouldn't fight with a woman. But why wasn't Jingshu here yet? He turned to look behind Zhang Yuyao. Soon, he saw Jingshu's figure. He saw Jingshu holding a pipa and walking over leisurely. That's more like it. It's not like we're taking refuge. Why do we need so many things? Zhang Feng glanced at the two girls and said indifferently, get on the carriage and set off. The two girls lifted their skirts and boarded the carriage one after the other. Zhang Feng glanced at the plaque on the door of the Zhang mansion and looked at the coachman with a complicated expression. Let's go. The coachman understood. He raised his whip and shouted, and the carriage slowly moved forward. Du Ziting led a group of servants to look at the master's back from afar. They knew that this was the master's road to meteoric success from now on, and it was also the road that the master had to take to return home. The carriage went further and further away, speeding along the street. Soon, it was out of the gate of Chang'an city. Time passed little by little. The carriage was on the road. Zhang Feng and the others didn't find any inn on the road, so they could only eat the dry food they brought along. This made the two girls feel a little uncomfortable, especially Zhang Yuyao. She had never suffered any hardships. She basically lived a life of luxury at home. But on the road, she had to eat dry food? They couldn't not eat. There was no fresh food on the road. This made the two girls feel nauseous again, and they almost vomited. The good thing was that the dry food was beef jerky. Although it was dry and unpalatable, they could still make do. Zhang Feng was a little better. He didn't care so much. What couldn't he eat? Beef jerky was a good thing. Finally, after more than 10 days, a group of carriages came to the gate of Jiangnan city. The carriage in front was covered with dust. At first glance, the rather gorgeous carriage looked like it had been robbed. However, the carriage behind was a little better. There was basically no dust. The group of carriages stopped. An elegant young man with a folding fan in his hand stepped out of the carriage. He glanced at the bustling street and smiled with satisfaction. Jiangnan is really a rich land. This young man was naturally Zhang Feng. The journey of more than 10 days had made him a little tired. But when he saw the scenery of Jiangnan, he instantly felt a little better. Prince Zhang, look, there's delicious food over there. The one who spoke was Xiao Cui. This girl had been taking care of Zhang Yuyao all the way. She was already suffering. But when she saw the food next to her, she was as happy as a child. She hugged Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile, Miss, there's delicious food over there. Let's go and have a look. Zhang Yuyao wiped the bitter water from the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and turned to look at Zhang Feng with a pleading face. Zhang Feng was a soft-hearted person. In addition, he was also hungry, so he went with the flow and agreed. The group walked to the front of the stall and found out that they were buying wontons. Zhang Feng was hungry. He didn't care about anything else. He ordered 5 big bowls and wolfed them down. Although Zhang Yuyao was also hungry, she still cared about her status as a lady. She didn't act as presumptuously as Zhang Feng. She chewed and swallowed slowly. Jingshu was the same. She put on the appearance of a lady. But when it was time to pay the bill, Zhang Feng was shocked. What? It's actually 50 copper coins? Chapter 2078. When he was in Chang'an, the most expensive wonton he had was 2 copper coins, and the cheapest one was 1 copper coin. But in Chang'an, 5 bowls of wonton actually cost 50 copper coins. It was not that he was stingy and did not want to pay, but the price was too unreasonable. It was several times higher than in Chang. Sir, I'm not deliberately asking for a high price, but the price is the same everywhere in Chang'an. The stall owner put on a pitiful expression. He pointed at the street vendors and said, "Right now, prices in Chang'an are soaring. The raw materials are more than 5 times more expensive than before, and we bought this place. Every month, we have to pay 2 strings of money as a stall fee. Otherwise, we can't do business, so we have no choice." The price is the same everywhere in Chang'an? Zhang Feng was stunned. Before he came, he had heard about how high the prices in Chang'an were, but he did not expect the prices to be so high. 5 bowls of wontons cost 50 copper coins, which was an average of 10 copper coins per bowl. It was more than 5 times higher than in Chang. He could not help but gasp. But more than that, he was resentful because he knew that this was all a trick by the Jiangnan clans. All the financial power and goods in Jiangnan were in the hands of the clans. As long as the prices were raised, they could profit from it and exploit the people's money. These bastards were really inhumane. Even though he was resentful, he still had to pay the money. After giving the money to the stall owner, Zhang Feng walked to the carriage with the 2 girls. But at this moment, a shout came from not far away. "Get out of the way!" Zhang Feng felt that something was wrong. He turned his head and saw a man dressed in silk rushing over. He was so scared that his face changed. He quickly pushed the 2 girls and Xiao Chui away, but he stumbled. Whoosh! The man suddenly reined in his horse. Seeing that the people on the ground were fine, he suddenly became angry. Where did this bastard come from? How dare you block Lao Tzu's way? Zhang Feng was instantly angry. He stood up and stared at the man with red eyes. Who do you think you are? This road is not your home. How dare you say it is your road? Also, you almost hit Lao Tzu? Hurry up and apologize to Lao Tzu. He didn't want to cause trouble as soon as he arrived, but now that trouble had come to him, he couldn't back down. Otherwise, others would think that he was easy to bully, and he would never be able to make a name for himself. However, this man was clearly not a kind person. When he heard Zhang Feng's words, the veins on his face bulged, and the whip in his hand creaked. How dare you? In all of Jiangnan, no one dares to speak to Lao Tzu like that. Today, I actually met someone who doesn't care about his life. As he spoke, he glanced behind him and said coldly, "Where is the Gao family? Break this dog's legs." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a commotion in the crowd. Dozens of men with sticks in their hands rushed out from the crowd and stood behind the man. "Young master." The roar was so loud that it was deafening. Of course, this voice naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Many vendors even stopped doing business and gathered around to watch. Voices of worry, ridicule, and ridicule all entered Zhang Feng's ears. Where did this wild brat come from? How dare he provoke the Jiangnan Gao family? Isn't he seeking his own death? Isn't that right? The Gao family is one of the tyrants of Jiangnan. They control a full 1/7 of Jiangnan's financial resources. Today, this brat fell into the hands of the Gao family's second young master. Maybe he'll die. Not necessarily. Look, this person is also wearing silk. Maybe he's a descendant of that family. Let's take a look first. Hearing the voices of the crowd, Zhang Feng frowned. The Jiangnan Gao family? A full 1/7 of Jiangnan's financial resources? Could it be that this person had 5 surnames and 7 hopes? No, there was no one with the surname Gao among the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Could it be a branch of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? He racked his brain and finally found a clue. It was the Fanyang Lu family of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. The Lu family originated with the surname Jiang and were descendants of Qi's Taigong. The Duke of Qi, Gao Ji, was the ancestor of the surname Lu. His descendants were given the surname Lu because they were in theft with Lu Yi. In 385 BC, Tian He replaced Qi. The Lu and Gao families were driven out. After leaving Lu Yi, the Lu family lived scattered between Yan and Qin. The main branch lived in Yan. In the Qin dynasty, There was a scholar of the 5 classics, Lu Ao. His descendants later moved to the Zhuo River and settled in Zhuo County. Because Zhuo County was part of Fanyang County, they were called the Zhuo people of Fanyang. Because of all these reasons, the person in front of him could only be a branch of the Lu family. Because the Lu family was originally surnamed Gao, they later changed their surname to Lu. Only the Lu family of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes had the power to control a seventh of Jiangnan's financial resources. He really didn't expect to get into a fight with the Lu family's henchmen as soon as he arrived in Jiangnan. He was instantly furious. He glanced at the carriage behind him and shouted, "All the guards of the Zhang family, come out." As soon as he finished speaking, the guards who had been resting in the carriage all got off and stood behind Zhang Feng with Mitsubishi bayonets in their hands. With the addition of the guards, the atmosphere on the scene instantly became incomparably solemn. Chapter 2079. The onlookers subconsciously took a step back because they could feel the murderous aura coming from these people. It was the aura of someone who had killed someone. It was like a scream from hell. Even so, there were still quite a few brave onlookers who started to discuss. Lao Tzu said that this kid isn't simple. Look, he's really hiding something. He even has a weapon in his hand. I wonder what that weapon is? It looks quite exquisite. I'll get it to play with when I have time. So what if this kid has someone? The second young master of the Gao family also has someone. Moreover, this kid doesn't seem to know young Master Gao's identity. If he does, I wonder if he'll pee in his pants. You guys, the Gao family has been exploiting us for years. Why are you still speaking up for them? You should be cursing the second young master to die a horrible death. When the discussions reached young Master Gao's ears, he already felt a little uncomfortable. At first, he thought that this kid was just an ordinary person. Who would have thought that he could summon so many people with a wave of his hand? He wasn't afraid. With the Gao family status, they could do whatever they wanted in Jiangnan. Why would they need to be afraid of a kid who was still wet behind the ears? He just felt a little uneasy because these people gave him the feeling that they were demons from hell. Everyone's hands were stained with blood. Who was he? He was made of porcelain. As for the other side, they were all boorish people. They were all pots. Let me ask you, how can porcelain and earthen pot meet force with force? Moreover, this guy had so many people. He couldn't go head-to-head with them. It was better to ask about this guy's background first. He repeatedly reminded himself that he wasn't afraid of these kids or the number of people. With that thought, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said coldly, "Kid, who are you? Don't you know that I'm the second young master of the Gao family? Do you know the consequences of offending me?" He emphasized the words Gao family and consequences in an attempt to warn the other party. However, these words were like farts in Zhang Feng's ears. Because he had no intention of letting this guy go. Even if he knew that this guy was a lackey of the Lu family, he was still fearless. Previously, he had already clashed with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Now, this Lu family's dog was contradicting him. Of course, he would not let him go so easily. He clenched his fist and pointed his index finger at the second young master of the Gao family. Lao Tzu, listen up. Lao Tzu's name is Zhang Feng. You must have been blind to bump into me, so I'll make you pay. As he spoke, he glanced at the guards behind him and said coldly, "Break one of the legs of that Gao guy." Hearing this, the guards all nodded their heads and walked towards the Gao family's young master with their Mitsubishi bayonets in hand. Gao Ju shivered and thought to himself, not good. He had already announced his name, but this guy didn't seem to be afraid at all. It seemed like he wasn't a good person either. If it were any other time, he would have already ordered his servants to beat them up. But now, he felt a little uneasy. They only had a dozen people on their side, while the other side had 50 people. There was a huge difference in numbers. If they fought, they would be at a disadvantage. Retreat? No, if they retreated now, where would the Gao family's face be? After thinking about it, he decided to take a gamble. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said coldly, "Brat, don't think that you can show off just because you have more people. Lao Tzu's Gao family isn't a pushover." As he spoke, he glanced at the servants and shouted, "All servants of the Gao family, kill this brat. Everyone will be rewarded 50 strings of silver." Hearing this, The eyes of the servants behind him instantly turned red. 50 strings of silver? That was 50 strings of silver. Their annual salary was only 5 strings of silver. 50 strings of silver was money that they could only earn in 10 years. Generous rewards would attract brave men. This saying was indeed true. Even though they knew the difference in strength between the two sides, none of the servants retreated. Instead, they gripped their clubs tightly and charged straight at Zhang Feng. The Zhang family's guards didn't hold back either. The Mitsubishi bayonets in their hands creaked. Soon, the two groups of people clashed. In an instant, many people fell on the street. Gao Wu's eyes widened because the people who fell were none other than his servants. He thought that even if these fellows couldn't beat the other side, they could at least exhaust some of them. As long as they could delay for a while, his reinforcements would arrive. But he didn't expect these fellows to be so weak. They fell as soon as they clashed. Did he raise them for nothing? Seeing those people with strange weapons coming over, he was a little scared. He turned to glance at Zhang Feng and said, "Brat, Lao Tzu will remember you. See you next time." With that, he quickly turned his horse around and galloped forward. Zhang Feng was a little dismissive of these harsh words. The Gao family was only the Lu family's lackeys. They didn't pose any threat at all. What worried him the most was the Lu family. They were a huge monster. Chapter 2080. Although the Lu family had been recorded since the Qin and Han dynasties, it was during the Eastern Han dynasty that Lu Ji became famous for his Confucianism. Thus, he was called the ancestor of the Lu family. During the Three Kingdoms, Lu Yu held the position of Minister of War of Chao Wei. After that, Lu Qin, Lu Ge, Lu Ji, and Lu Chen held high positions. During the Northern Wei dynasty, Lu Xian entered the imperial court as the First Order. During the Emperor Xiaowen's time, Lu Xian became one of the 4 surnames, Lu, Cui, Zheng, and Wang. After the Northern Wei dynasty split, Lu Jing's 3 sons became the imperial tutors of Western Wei, Northern Qi, and Northern Zhou. During the Tang dynasty, they were one of the 7 surnames and 10 families, producing 8 prime ministers. Together with the Cui family of Bowling and the Cui family of Qinghe, they were known as the Cui Lu. Of course, this was not an exaggeration. In fact, the Lu family did indeed have the strength and reputation. Every family held a high position in the imperial court and were even respectfully called the imperial preceptor. There were countless scholars and beauties. The most important thing was that they settled in Zhuo County, now Zhuozhou, Hebei province. It was a flat land with fertile fields and was famous for being a fertile land. The map of the Yan kingdom that Jing Ku presented when he assassinated the king of Qin was located in this area. The Fanyang Lu family had been farming and studying here for generations. Their descendants had multiplied and become a world-famous aristocratic family. The reason why Zhang Feng was worried was because of the Lu family's geographical advantage. Fortunately, the Lu family had extended their reach to Jiangnan, but the overall family was still in Zhuo County. Therefore, they had to take advantage of the time when these guys were not paying attention to them to develop their power. Thinking of this, he called for the guards to stop. That Gao fellow had already run far away. There was no need to chase after him. It would be bad if the Gao family retaliated. After cleaning up the scene, Zhang Feng began to search for Jia Doran's whereabouts according to the address. Seeing that the guards had left, the Gao family's servants hurriedly got up to chase after their young master. They had failed to protect their young master today and had to return early to avoid punishment. After chasing for a while, the servants finally saw their young master running on the road. They hurriedly rushed forward and said, young master, young master." Hearing this, Gao Su reined in his horse and turned around abruptly. He lashed out with the horsewhip in his hand and shouted, "You bastards, I was almost beaten to death just now. Are you all dead?" The servants all knelt on the ground, not daring to say a word, silently enduring the young master's anger. Blood splattered all over their backs, and their clothes were torn apart, but their eyes were filled with coldness. Because they knew that they couldn't blame the young master. It was all because of that brat called Zhang Feng. In the future, he would definitely tear that brat Zhang Feng into pieces and plant the seeds of hatred. After a moment, Gao Su seemed to be tired of whipping. He withdrew his whip and coldly swept his eyes over the crowd. Where did that reckless brat go? The leader of the guards raised his head slightly, but the cold sweat on his forehead revealed his fear. He said in a trembling voice, "Young master, that brat left with the guards." Gao Su narrowed his eyes and said with a gloomy face, "You're leaving just like that after offending Lao Tzu?" As he spoke, he glanced at the head servant. "You, take 2 men with you and follow that fellow. Find out where that fellow lives. When the time comes, report back to me. The rest of you, follow me back to the residence." After he finished speaking, he whipped his horse and galloped forward. The head servant glanced at the people around him, randomly picked a few, and turned around to leave. The others followed young Master Gao to the Gao residence. A moment later, a huge mansion appeared in front of everyone. There was even a gold-rimmed Phoebe Jinan wooden plaque hanging on it. There were 2 big words written on it, Gao Mansion. Next to these 2 big words was a line of small words, Fanyang Lu family. Gao Su flipped off his horse like a carp and walked straight to the door. There were 4 servants standing at the door. When they saw that their young master had returned, they hurriedly went to greet him. "Young master, get lost," Gao Su shouted. He was in a bad mood, so how could he let these lowly servants dirty his eyes? Hearing this, the servants hurriedly retreated. They knew that this second young master had a bad temper. Usually, he relied on second madam's favor to be arrogant and unrestrained in the residence. Who knew how many servants had been beaten to death? They didn't want to be the next one. Gao Su threw his whip on the ground and quickly walked to the front yard. "Young master, you're back." A white-haired old man greeted him. He was the head steward of the Gao residence. He was brought over by second madam when she got married, so he was given the name Gao Cheng. He watched Gao Su grow up, so he had an indescribable feeling for Gao Su. "Gao Cheng, where's my father?" Gao Su glanced at Gao Cheng, his expression slightly better. However, Gao Cheng's brows furrowed. He knew that the second young master was usually a dandy, but he treated him well and called him steward. Why did he call him by his real name today? Could it be that this fellow fought with some family's young master again? Did he lose and come back to complain? After some thought, he sighed and said, "Young master, old master is in the backyard." "Then I'll go find him." Gao Su turned around and prepared to walk to the backyard. Chapter 2081. Gao Cheng pulled Gao Shi back and dissuaded him. "Young master, master doesn't like to be disturbed in the backyard. Why don't you wait for a moment?" "How can I do that?" Gao Su's face was full of astonishment. His eyes widened as he said, "I have an important matter to discuss with father. Mother asterisk her, I was almost beaten by a brat today. I must get justice for father." As expected, Gao Cheng secretly said in his heart, "Young master really fought with someone else. Young master is too restless. He fights with others every day. Last time, he just beat up someone from the Wang family. This time, he beat up someone else? I wonder who he beat up this time? Last time, the Wang family was fine. He was just a lonely noble. Just give him some money and suppress him with force. This time, if he beat up that young master, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess." After thinking about it, he turned to look at Gao Shi. "Young master, you go to the hall first. I'll go to the backyard and call master over." Gao Su originally wanted to go directly to the backyard to find his father and smear some mud on the way, pretending that he had been beaten up. With his father's doting personality, he would definitely kill that brat surnamed Zhang. But now, it seemed that it was better to lie down in the hall and pretend to be seriously injured. Thinking about it, he nodded and said happily, "Okay, Uncle Cheng, quickly go and inform father. I'll lie down in the hall first. Remember, you must say that I'm seriously injured and can't get up." Gao Cheng let out a bitter laugh. Young master's temperament really didn't change at all. Just now, he called him Gao Cheng. Now, he called him Uncle Cheng? And he wanted to lie down in the hall and pretend to be seriously injured? However, he had watched Gao Shi grow up. No matter what kind of rude request he made, he would agree to it. So he could only turn and walk to the backyard. Gao Shi grabbed some mud and smeared it on his face. He even deliberately tore his clothes and lay down in the hall, thinking about what he would say when father came. On the other side, Gao Cheng had already reached the backyard. Countless exotic flowers and herbs were planted here, and there were even quite a few precious species. Many of them were species that even the imperial palace did not have. A middle-aged man stood in the middle of the flowers. He had a high bun on his hair, and the hair on his temples were graying. There were obvious wrinkles on his face, and his turbid eyes were half squinted, as if he was sensing the aura of the flowers. He was the head of the Gao family, Gao Xian. "Master, second young master is back," Gao Cheng said from behind. Gao Xian frowned, obviously dissatisfied. He didn't like others to disturb him at this time, but when he heard that it was his son, his frown relaxed a little. "It's fine that you're back, but do you have to report to me? Don't you know that I don't like to be disturbed?" Gao Cheng was slightly stunned and immediately said, "Master, I didn't mean to disturb you, but it's young master, Val?" Gao Xian frowned. She turned her head slightly and asked, "What's wrong?" Young master fought with someone again. This time, it seems that his injuries are not light. Gao Cheng lowered his head and said worriedly. He knew that master usually doted on second young master the most, but at the same time, he hated it when second young master went out to fight. That was because master only had 2 sons, and there were only 2 successors in the big Gao family. If anything happened to second young master, the heavy responsibility of reviving the family would be left to eldest young master alone. This was very disadvantageous for a big family. Sure enough, when Gao Xian heard Gao Cheng's report, he frowned and shouted angrily, "Who dares to hit my Gao family's disciple? And how is that unfilial son now?" Gao Cheng hurriedly lowered his head and said softly, "Young master is lying in the hall now. We don't know who hit him yet." As soon as he finished speaking, Gao Xian waved his sleeves and walked towards the hall. Seeing this, Gao Cheng hurriedly followed behind. In the hall, Val was lying on the ground, purposely moaning in pain, trying to confuse his father who was about to arrive. "It hurts," a series of cries entered Gao Xian's ears. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickened his steps. As soon as he entered the door, he saw his most beloved son sitting on the ground. His whole body was covered in mud, and his clothes were torn. This was definitely a beating, and not a light one at that. He hurriedly went forward and asked with a face full of concern, "What's going on? Who did you fight with?" When Val saw that his father had come, it was as if he had found someone to vent all the grievances he had suffered. Tears streamed down his face, and he said while crying, "Father, it was an unknown boy. I was riding a horse on the street, and that bastard blocked my horse and let the servants hit me. Father, you have to help me." Hearing his sons crying, Gao Xian frowned. He faintly felt that something was wrong. With the Gao family's status in Chang'an, not to mention an unknown boy, even the other 4 big families did not dare to touch the Gao family, let alone the Gao family's young master. How could a boy dare to hit the Gao family's young master? There was something strange about this. Could it be an outsider? But an outsider should have heard of the Jiangnan Gao family, right? Chapter 2082. After all, the Gao family was backed by the Lu family. Who dared to provoke them? However, there was someone who dared to touch the Gao family and even made an oath? He couldn't care so much now. Even if it was a branch of the other 5 families, he had to tear off a piece of skin for beating his son. Thinking about it, he turned his head and glanced at the steward, Gao Cheng, and said fiercely, "Gao Cheng, immediately send someone to find that kid and then come back to the residence. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." A vicious look flashed in Gao Su's eyes. He quickly said, "Steward, my men have already followed that kid. You can ask them and they'll find him." He couldn't wait anymore. He couldn't wait to trample on that reckless kid. However, at this moment, a mocking voice came from outside. "You still have the face to go home after being beaten?" Gao Su's eyes narrowed. He had a bad feeling. This was because he knew that this was his big brother, the young master of the Gao family, Gao Ming. This guy had been smart since he was young. He was familiar with the classics and history and was deeply doted on by his father. He heard that his father wanted to make this guy the heir of the Gao family. However, he knew that his father liked him at the same time, so he didn't make this guy. It seemed that he was preparing to think about it. He wasn't worried that the heir would fall into his big brother's hands. This was because his mother was deeply doted on by his father, and that big brother's mother had already fallen out of favor. Therefore, this big brother was now just a decoration in his eyes. He responded rudely, "Gao Ming, what do you mean?" As soon as his voice fell, a young man with a folding fan in his hand walked out from the side of the door. This young man had a delicate face with distinct features. In particular, his white clothes made him look fresh and refined. However, there was a hint of coldness in the corner of his eyes, giving people a very gloomy feeling. "Second brother, I'm your big brother. It's not good to call my real name like this, right?" Gao Ming waved his folding fan, and the corner of his mouth outlined an indescribable smile. "What's not good about it?" Gao Shi snorted and curled his lips. "Didn't you just mock me?" Gao Ming was about to speak, but Gao Xian waved his hand and interrupted, "All right, you two are brothers. What can't be solved? Why must you quarrel?" These words left Gao Lu speechless. He originally wanted to ridicule Gao Lu, but he had no choice but to stop. However, Gao Su was unwilling to let it go. He tugged at Gao Xian's sleeve and begged, "Father, I was beaten up. Big brother is still mocking me. You should punish him. And that brat, you have to avenge me." "All right." Gao Xian flicked her sleeves impatiently and turned to look at Gao Cheng, who was standing by outside the door. "Gao Cheng, send someone to capture him immediately. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." Gao Cheng nodded and turned around to leave. But at that moment, Gao Ming took a step forward. "Father, I think there's something fishy about this." When he thought about it, he couldn't stand this younger brother of his. It was fine that he usually acted like a tyrant at home, but he even ran to the streets to fight. Last time, the family had spent a lot of money to clean up this brat's mess, and this time he was here again? Another reason was that his father had never announced his successor. He was very worried that the successor would fall on this useless younger brother of his. After all, his mother was no longer favored. If that vixen from the second branch was blowing pillow talk, this would obviously be ruined. Of course, there was another important reason for him to go forward. That was, he could see that Gao Su's injuries were fake. With this reason, he was even more fearless. Thus, he pointed at Gao Su and said sternly, "Father, second brother's injuries are fake. There must be something strange about it." Hearing this, Gao Su's heart thumped. He thought to himself, how did big brother see through it? I've been hiding it very well. If father finds out that I'm faking it, will he not catch that brat? Thinking of this, he turned to look at Gao Xian. Gao Xian was as calm as usual because he had long seen that his son was faking it. But what could he do? Something like this had happened before. This brat had pretended to be dead. This time, if he didn't follow his request, he would probably have to lie in bed for 17 or 18 days. The Gao family was big and he only had 2 sons. What could he do if he didn't pamper them? Now that his eldest son had exposed his second son, he could only play the peacemaker. Ming, even if you can see through it, there's no need to say it. You don't know Gao Er's personality. With that, he turned and sat upright on the chair, as if relieved of a burden. Gao Su also finally breathed a sigh of relief because his father wasn't angry. But his father didn't seem to have said anything about revenge. He hurriedly got up and half knelt at Gao Xian's feet, pleading, "Father, you must avenge me." Gao Xian had thought that his son was lying on the ground to put on an act. Maybe he had beaten up some family's young master or bullied someone. Now that he looked at it, he was afraid that wasn't the case. He knew his son too well. Normally, he wouldn't tear his clothes apart because of this, unless he was beaten up by someone. Chapter 2083. His expression immediately became serious, and he said with a serious face, "Gao, what's going on? Who dares to hit a member of our Gao family?" Gao Ming also became interested. He crossed his arms and looked at Gao Wu with an evil smile. Someone dared to hit a member of the Gao family? And it was the young master of the Gao family? This matter seemed to be getting more and more interesting. Right now, he even wanted to get to know the person who hit this guy. Where did he get the courage? Gao Wu didn't know these thoughts. He deliberately squeezed out a tear and cried, "Father, Today I was riding a horse on Canal Avenue. There was a person in front of me who blocked my way. He even said that our Gao family was a low-class family. He called the guards to beat me. Fortunately, I ran quickly. Otherwise, I would have been beaten to death. Wait. Gao Ming smiled and waved his folding fan. Second brother, your words are full of loopholes. First, everyone knows your personality. Who dares to stop you when you ride a horse on Canal Avenue? Who dares to not give our Gao family face? Second, why did someone stop you? This is simply impossible. Also, even if someone is dissatisfied with the Gao family, they wouldn't mock us on the street unless they are idiots. Gao Wu seemed to have been caught. He suddenly jumped up and pointed at Gao Ming. What do you mean? Are you suspecting that I'm lying? Gao, tell me the truth. Otherwise, don't expect me to help you. Gao Xian frowned slightly. He also noticed the problem with these words. Gao Wu instantly withered and could only say submissively, Today, I was riding a horse on Canal Avenue and almost hit someone. I wanted to make that person go away, but that person fell. Then we quarreled. I said that he was from the Gao family, but that person didn't seem to be afraid. Then I asked the guards to beat this guy. In the end, this guy waved his hand and called over 50 people. He even knocked down all the guards. Only then did I run back. Gao Xian's frown deepened. There were clearly many things that were wrong here. Even if his son hit someone, the average person wouldn't dare to offend the Gao family. They would all pat their butts and go home. Some even went up to apologize. Why did this guy come out now? Not only did he not apologize, but he also dared to beat people? And there were more than 50 guards? When did Chang'an have such a powerful young master? He was a little confused. He turned to look at Gao Ming, hoping that his eldest son would have some clues. Gao Ming was actually very happy because there was finally someone in Chang'an who dared to go head-to-head with his younger brother. Wasn't this a good thing for him? But at the same time, he was also confused, because in his social circle, there was no such young master. The young masters of the clans usually liked to bully the poor people, and it was not easy to bully those of the same level. After all, they all had the 5 surnames and 7 hopes standing behind them. Since he was not a young master of the clan, there was only one possibility. Foreigners? A foreign young master? As he thought about it, he turned to look at Gao Xian. Father, there's usually no one in Jiangnan who dares to go against us. The other 6 forces shouldn't be so stupid either. After all, we're in a cooperative relationship now. Do you think there could be outsiders? Gao Xian nodded as if he agreed with his son's words. But suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. He narrowed his eyes and said, Ming, do you think it could be that hidden power? Gao Ming frowned, obviously thinking about something. After a while, he said, Father, it shouldn't be. After all, that hidden power is not as strong as our 7 families. They wouldn't dare to provoke our Gao family so brazenly. Gao Xian nodded slightly and said to himself, Then who could it be? Who could have so many people in Jiangnan? As he spoke, he turned to look at Gao Yu at his feet. Gao Yu, did the person who came leave his name? His name is... Gao Yu raised his head and thought for a while. Suddenly he shouted, I remember, that person is called Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng? Gao Xian frowned. He was thinking about who this person was. Suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. He slammed the table and stood up. He said sternly, That person is Zhang Feng? Gao Yu, are you sure you didn't hear wrong? He had heard of this guy's name in Chang'an before. It was rumored that he had founded an academy at a young age and had Yu Shinan and the others as his teachers. He studied military counselors, life, and so on. He had endless means. The most terrifying thing was that this guy was the public enemy of the 5 families and 7 kingdoms. Think about it, how powerful must this guy be to attract the attention of the 5 families and 7 kingdoms? He had heard that this guy was coming to Jiangnan. As a branch of the Lu family, he had naturally sent people to inquire about it. But there was no news on the way. How could he have expected that he would suddenly appear here? And fight with his son? This was obviously not a good sign. It was not because he was afraid of Zhang Feng, but because he was cautious as the head of the family. This guy had been very famous in Chang'an before. This time, he must have come to Jiangnan prepared. If he attacked rashly, he might not be able to get anything good. Gao, you didn't know about this? He asked with a startled face. Father, what's wrong with you? Why are you so nervous about a Zhang? Chapter 2084. In his impression, his father was someone who would remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Now, he became like this after hearing a kid's name? Could it be that this kid had a strong background? Or was it the young master of the clan? Could it be that he could not take revenge? Gao Xian was not in the mood to pay attention to him. Instead, he turned to Gao Ming and said solemnly, Ming, I've told you about Zhang Feng before. Do you still remember? Gao Ming nodded. He remembered that his father had said that Zhang Feng was a famous talent in Chang. Although he had no parents, he had a group of friends and relatives. All of them had extraordinary status, especially the group of businessmen. It was as if they could cover the sky with one hand. Back then, Madame Lu had sent people to investigate, but there was no news. The only thing they knew was that this group of businessmen was very rich, and that was all. And Zhang Feng, with the help of this group of businessmen, slowly rose from a small tavern to a noble title in the imperial court. He even opened an academy, made weapons, and produced necessities. In short, as long as it was something that could not be found in the world, this guy seemed to be able to do it. Even Jiangnan would sell some of Zhang Feng's goods, such as braised meat, rubber, food, and so on. For a moment, he even wanted to get to know this guy and see what kind of person the people of Chang'an worshipped as a god was. However, he knew that he could not. This guy was the enemy of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. If he got to know him, he would undoubtedly be digging his own grave. At the same time, he also felt sorry for Zhang Feng. What kind of people could he offend? Why did he have to offend the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? Wasn't this courting death? Sigh, a talent was going to fall. While daydreaming, he turned to look at Gao Xian and said solemnly, Father, you've told me about this Zhang Feng before. I've also studied him. He is indeed quite talented, but he is a bit arrogant and conceited. He dares to make enemies with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? I'm afraid he's someone who can't see the situation clearly. Gao Xian nodded. He felt the same way. After all, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were famous families. Even if Zhang Feng was more powerful, what could he do? Could he still shake the 7 great families? However, since this guy dared to come to Jiangnan, he must have made preparations. It was better not to confront him head-on. After thinking about it, he looked at Gao Ming. Ming, what do you think? Gao Ming slightly furrowed his brows and said, Father, I don't think it's the right time to confront Zhang Feng. We should figure out his purpose. Firstly, he didn't want to avenge Gao Jian. Secondly, he didn't know Zhang Feng's power at all. If he acted rashly, he would definitely be at a disadvantage, so it was better to wait. Thirdly, he wanted to see this mysterious person and see if he was really as powerful as the rumors said. If it was true, maybe he could take him in and make plans for the future. Of course, these were all his own thoughts. But Gao Hu, who was at the side, didn't agree. He jumped 8 feet high, pointed at Gao Ming angrily, and said fiercely, What do you mean? Could it be that you don't want me to take revenge? Lao Tzu is your brother, and this is how you treat me? Younger brother? Gao Ming sneered. He thought to himself, Do you think you're worthy? But because his father was here, he couldn't go too far. He could only say, Second brother, that Zhang Feng didn't hit you, right? Besides, we haven't figured out his purpose. How do you want to do it? Do you want to be beaten by him? Gao, whose eyes were red, and the veins could be faintly seen. He was very dissatisfied with his big brother's attitude, especially this sneer, which made him feel a chill. Just as he was about to curse, Gao Xian couldn't stand it anymore. He only had 2 sons, and he thought that both of them were talented. But the eldest son was talented, and the second son had developed a playboy temperament. Usually, he couldn't hit or scold him, and the 2 of them were like fire and water. Today, they were quarreling because of an outsider? He sternly scolded, Enough, both of you shut up. As his voice fell, Gao, who was slightly stunned, then he glared fiercely at Gao Ming before letting it go. Gao Ming, on the other hand, looked indifferent because he understood his father's temperament. Although he doted on his second son, he wouldn't absolutely indulge him. Sure enough, Gao Xian glanced at his two sons, and finally his gaze fell on Gao Hu. He said with a loving face, "Gao Hu, put your personal grudges aside first. Wait until I investigate Zhang Feng's forces in Jiangnan, then I will avenge you." Gao Hu's heart skipped a beat. He was about to plead, but he saw Gao Xian looking at Gao Ming again, and said with a serious face, "Ming Yar, I'll leave the investigation of Zhang Feng to you. You must investigate Zhang Feng's forces in Jiangnan. Also, inform the other 6 families of Zhang Feng's arrival in Jiangnan. Let them know as well." "Yes, father." Gao Ming folded his fan and cupped his hands. Then, as if he thought of something, he asked, "Father, it's not good to tell the other 6 families about Zhang Feng, right?" Gao Xian raised his eyebrows and asked with a little doubt, "Ming, do you have any objections?" Chapter 2085. Gao Ming nodded and said solemnly, "Father, although the other 6 families seem to be cooperating with us on the surface, they all have their own ulterior motives. Everyone wants to gain more benefits and even want to squeeze the other families dry of their money. Zhang Feng's arrival might be able to break this situation. If we don't talk about Zhang Feng, who knows if that family will fight with Zhang Feng one day and we can profit from it. Even if Zhang Feng suffers losses, we won't lose out." Gao Xian's body trembled. He realized that he had to re-evaluate this son of his. He didn't realize that his son was so scheming before. This time, he was so good at hiding Zhang Feng's whereabouts. If he bumped into the heads of the other 6 families, then the Gao family would be the fishermen. Thinking about this, he smiled with satisfaction. "Ming, you're right. We'll do as you say. However, we still need to know Zhang Feng's whereabouts." Gao Ming nodded and his lips curled into an evil smile. "Father, don't worry. Leave this to me. I'll make sure that Zhang Feng won't be able to escape from the Gao family." Saying this, he waved his fan and turned to walk towards the front yard. As soon as he left, he heard a burst of unbridled laughter. Gao Ming felt that it was ear-piercing and secretly spat. He turned to look at Gao Xian. "Father, look at Big Brother. He clearly doesn't put you in his eyes. He's too presumptuous." Gao Xian didn't answer. Instead, he raised his head and glanced at Gao Ming, who was walking away. His eyes flashed with worry. The reason why he didn't make Gao Ming the successor of the Gao family was because this guy was sometimes too vicious. He didn't leave any leeway when doing things. He was smart enough to be the head of the family, but he was worried that the head of the family would make a move on his brother. This was the reason why he didn't make a successor for a long time. At the same time, Zhang Feng also found traces of Jia Daoren. He was in a manor. This manor wasn't very big, but it wasn't small either. It belonged to the middle class and was enough to accommodate everyone. Now, everyone was sitting in the main hall and discussing what to do next. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and then looked at Jia Daoren. "Old Jia, tell me about the current situation in Jiangnan. The more detailed, the better." Jia Daoren nodded and said, "Jiangnan now has 8 major powers." "The 8 major powers?" Zhang Feng frowned slightly. "Didn't he hear about the 7 great forces on the street just now?" He asked with a puzzled expression. "Old merchant, I heard that there are only 7 major forces on the streets. Why are you saying that there are 8 major forces? 7 great powers?" Jia Daoren's face was filled with question marks. He turned to look at Zhang Feng and asked, "Master, who did you hear this from?" Sensing that something was amiss, Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Previously, I met a rich young master on the street. He said his surname was Gao, and he almost hit Yu Yao and Jingshu with his horse." Hearing this, Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu couldn't help but shudder. They were still stuck in the terrifying scene just now. If it weren't for Prince Zhang's quick reflexes, they might have already been killed. Of course, Zhang Feng felt the same way. He waved his fist with a look of grief and indignation. "That guy with the surname Gao almost hit Yu Yao and Jingshu. If I hadn't been fast enough, I'm afraid they would have." "Surnamed Gao?" Jia Daoren's expression unconsciously became serious. There weren't many families with the surname Gao in Jiangnan. There were only 3 or 4 families. Only the branch of the Lu family would dare to hit people on the street. Thinking about this, he hurriedly asked, "Master, did that Gao guy leave his name?" Zhang Feng tilted his head and thought for a while before saying, "That person seems to be called Gao Jian or something." As expected, Jia Daoren had a bad feeling. The master had just arrived and he was already facing the Gao family. This was an ominous sign. Although the Gao family was one of the 8 great forces in Jiangnan, no one dared to casually challenge them in Jiangnan. This time, the master was facing that second young master. It was likely that things wouldn't end well. He hurriedly asked, "Master, you didn't hurt the second young master of the Gao family, did you?" "No, I didn't." Zhang Feng waved his hand and didn't care so much. However, when he saw Jia Daoren let out a long breath, he asked in confusion, "Old merchant, what's wrong? Is the Gao family very powerful in Jiangnan?" Jia Daoren nodded with a serious face. "Master, the Gao family belongs to the branch of the Lu family. At the same time, they are also one of the 8 great forces in Jiangnan. They are involved in silk, iron, and other businesses. This time, the rise in prices in Jiangnan is most likely due to this guy." Zhang Feng was shocked. He knew that the Gao family belonged to the branch of the Lu family, but he didn't know that this guy was also involved in silk, iron, and other businesses. Although he had some guesses, when he heard Jia Daoren say it out loud, he was still shocked. He hurriedly said, "Old merchant, you just said that there are 8 great forces in Jiangnan. What are the other 7? Jia Daoren glanced at the crowd and said with a serious face, "The 8 great forces in Jiangnan are the Gao family, which belongs to the branch of the Lu family in Fanyang. The Wu family belongs to the branch of the Zheng family in Xingyang. The Wu family belongs to the branch of the Wang clan in Taiyuan. The Qi family belongs to the branch of the Cui family in Qinghe. The Fan family belongs to the branch of the Cui family in Boling. The Zhao family belongs to the branch of the Li family in Zhao County. The Dang family belongs to the branch of the Li family in Longxi." Chapter 2086. The Yang family? Zhang Feng frowned. He faintly thought of something and hurriedly said, "Could this branch be from the Sui dynasty?" Jia Daoren nodded and said with a serious face, "It is indeed from the Sui dynasty. After the Sui dynasty was destroyed, there were many remnants left behind. They all migrated to Jiangnan and slowly established their power here. At first, their power was not very strong, so His Majesty did not care. Later, the Yang family rose bit by bit and began to control the situation in Jiangnan. Later, the branches of the 5 surnames and 7 aspirations also came and slowly established their power here. They even faintly surpassed the Yang family. Now, the Yang family's power is basically no longer able to compete with the branches of the 5 surnames and 7 aspirations." Hearing this, Zhang Feng had a general understanding of the situation in Jiangnan. However, he still had a question. "Old Jia, why do people only say that there are 7 major powers in Jiangnan? Why don't they mention the Yang family?" Jia Daoren smiled. After all, the Yang family is a remnant of the previous dynasty. Although they have nothing to do with Yang Guang and His Majesty does not control them, many people still feel that they are not suitable to deal with. They only treat them as a merchant alliance and nothing more. Besides, their power is far inferior to the other 7 powers. Naturally, many people have forgotten about them and are unwilling to mention them. Zhang Feng nodded. Now he finally understood. He did not expect Jiangnan to have such a complicated relationship. Although he knew that there were branches of the remnant of the previous dynasty, he did not expect them to gradually establish their power in Jiangnan. Although the Yang family could not be compared to the 5 surnames and 7 aspirations, they still had some power. Who knows, they might be useful in the future. Moreover, the Yang family was a native of Jiangnan. They must know more than the other 7 families. Even if he could not use them, he must not offend them now. Thinking of this, he asked, "Old Jia, how is the relationship between the Yang family and the other 7 families?" Jia Daoren's interest was piqued when he heard this. He even changed his sitting position and said with a smile, "Master, you don't know, but the Yang family and the 7 families are like fire and water. Originally, Jiangnan was under the Yang family's control. Because His Majesty didn't give any orders to restrict them, their businesses could be said to be all over the world, including silk, iron, coal, and so on. As long as it was something that the Yang family was involved in, they would all be involved in it. Now, 80% of Jiangnan's businesses are monopolized by the 7 families. Among them, the Qi family's business is the largest, and the Gao family is only average. If that's the case, the Yang family isn't having a good time now. Zhang Feng frowned. He had originally wanted to form an alliance with the Yang conglomerate to deal with the 7 families together. After all, one more friend meant one more path. But now, it seemed that the 7 families might not even be able to protect themselves. That's not necessarily the case. Jia Daoren smiled and took a sip of tea before saying, although the Yang family only has 20% of Jiangnan's business, they still have some savings. They saw that there was no way for them to develop in Jiangnan, so they started to sell to other places, even to remote places, such as the border. Zhang Feng frowned. They don't have any power in Jiangnan. How can they send things out? Jia Daoren's eyes turned and glanced out the window. He said cautiously, the Yang family has been in Jiangnan for so many years. They still have some power in private. They have many gangs that help them transport goods. Gangs? Zhang Feng was stunned. Could it be a gang? This was his first reaction. Because if they could establish gangs, they would definitely be involved in the underworld, killing and robbing. He subconsciously asked, the Yang family has established gangs? Not gangs. Jia Daoren shook his head. It's the kind of gangs that usually transport goods. They usually don't do anything outrageous. In fact, they are forced to do this. If it weren't for these gangs, how could the 7 families let them send the goods out? They would have starved to death. Zhang Feng nodded. Indeed, if there was no one to protect a large number of goods, it would be very dangerous, not to mention that the Yang family was a fat piece of meat in the eyes of the 7 families. They couldn't wait to eat it. Did the 7 families establish gangs? He asked curiously. Of course. Jia Daoren nodded and said, they established a huge gang. Usually, it's for transporting goods. When it's free, it's for the common people. Very few people know about it. It's called the 7 United Gang, which means the alliance of the 7 families. The Yang family's gang is called the Giant Sand Gang. I don't know what it means. 7 United Gang? Giant Sand Gang? Zhang Feng silently repeated it. He felt that if he wanted to defeat the 7 families, he would encounter these gangs sooner or later. He should take care of these gangs. Chapter 2087. Fortunately, he brought some guards with him this time. If he faced these gangsters, he would have some confidence. However, these people seemed to be a little small. He turned to look at Jia Daoren and said solemnly, Old Jia, do you have any way to recruit some people to serve as guards? Otherwise, I'm afraid the 50 people I brought are a little small. Jia Daoren smiled and said, Master, you don't have to worry about this. I've been in Jiangnan for so long. Naturally, I've bought some people. Although there aren't many, there are more than 300 people. The guards are enough. Zhang Feng looked at Jia Daoren in surprise. He didn't expect this old guy to have a trick up his sleeve. He couldn't help but look at him in a new light. Old Jia, you've done well. Including the 300 people under you, we can be considered a big force now. As he spoke, he seemed to think of something and frowned. How is your now? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu looked at each other and then looked at Jia Daoren. Although they had accepted Prince Zhang came to Jiangnan to find her this time. It made the 2 girls a little uncomfortable. Later, when they heard that she was in danger, they couldn't help but worry about her. They didn't know what they were thinking now. Were they worried about Yu? Or were they jealous? While they were daydreaming, Jia Daoren said, Master, Miss Yu's situation is not very good now. Many young masters of the 7 families have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected by the Yu family. This made those young masters very angry. They used their family's power and began to restrict the Yu family's business. Now, many of the Yu family's businesses are restricted by the 7 families. Most of them can't be sold. Zhang Feng frowned. He didn't expect Yu's situation to be so bad. But the good thing was that her life was not in danger. Now, he could only help Yu get out of this predicament as soon as possible. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Jia Daoren. What business of Yu's family is restricted? It's rice paper. Jia Daoren frowned. Rice paper? Zhang Feng was delighted. When he came over this time, he brought some paper with him. The quality was much higher than Xian paper. It was made in the paper factory back then. If he could open up the market in Chang'an, he would not have to worry about Yu's family being restricted. He smiled and said, "Old merchant, send someone to buy a few houses later. We'll start attacking the market tomorrow." Master Fu? Jia Daoren looked at Zhang Feng in confusion. "Do you also want to sell rice paper?" Zhang Feng shook his head. "I'm not selling Xian paper. I have paper better than Xian paper in my hands. You've been in Jiangnan all this time, so you might not know. When I was in Jiangnan, I already made paper better than Xian paper. It's just that I didn't sell it to Jiangnan." "Better paper than rice paper?" Jia Daoren frowned in disbelief. One had to know that Xian paper was a high-end paper product used by many nobles. Even the emperor used Xian paper. The scholars of the world even crowned Xian paper as the #1 paper in the world. How could there be other papers that could surpass Xian paper? Zhang Feng saw Jia Daoren's look of disbelief and waved to the guard at the door. The guard understood, turned around, and ran away. Not long after, sheets of white and flawless paper were laid out in front of Jia Daoren. Jia Daoren looked at the paper in front of him and his pupils constricted. He stuttered, "What paper is this? Why is it so white?" As he spoke, he could not help but touch the white paper. His body suddenly trembled. This paper is actually smoother than Xian paper?" Zhang Feng smiled and grabbed a piece of white paper. "This is the paper I told you about. How does it compare to Xian paper?" "This is simply much better than Xian paper." Jia Daoren did not even think and directly answered. His face was red as he said, "If this were to be sold in the world, it would definitely attract the attention of scholars." "Master, how much of this paper do you have now?" Zhang Feng did not directly answer. Instead, he frowned. "Not a lot, but it should be enough to sell for 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days? Jia Daoren's brows were almost knitted into a line. "Master, 2 or 3 days is not enough. You don't know how crazy the scholars in Jiangnan are. Once there is something good, they will buy it even if they have to go bankrupt. I'm afraid that your things will be sold out in a day." Zhang Feng raised his head and thought for a while. Then he said, "It's okay. Open the shop first and put out the paper signboard. I will immediately write a letter to Chang'an and to send the paper over." "It seems like this is the only way." Jia Daoren's face was sad. "But Chang'an is so far away from Jiangnan. Even if you ride a horse at full speed, I'm afraid it will take 7 days?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and did not mind. "It doesn't matter if it takes longer. First, establish the market. In the future, if the results are good, we will open a paper factory in Jiangnan. Then, we won't have to ship goods over from Chang'an." Jia Daoren nodded. "Master, then I will go and arrange the shop." As he spoke, he stood up and walked out of the door. His steps were very fast. He walked to the door like a gust of wind. If he was slower, he would definitely be able to see the black shadow behind the door. Chapter 2088. Seeing that the people in the house were gradually dispersing, the black shadow took a deep look at Zhang Feng and flipped over the courtyard wall like a carp. Crossing the street, the black shadow's footsteps became faster. After about half an hour, he stopped at the back door of a mansion. At this time, if someone raised their head to look, they would see 2 large words written on the plaque above the door, Gao Mansion. The black shadow did not linger and gently pushed the door. As if there was someone inside to receive him, the door was opened. The black shadow jumped and ran directly to a brightly lit house. After pushing open the door, the black shadow half knelt at the threshold. "Young master." A young man sat inside, holding a folding fan in his hand and looking down at the game of Go. He was elegant. It was Gao Ming from this morning. He put down the chess piece, glanced at the black shadow, and said lightly, "Come here." Hearing this, the black shadow raised his head and glanced at the door. Seeing that there was no one, he walked forward. "Young master, I found out everything." Gao Ming was obviously interested. He closed his folding fan and said with a serious face, "Is that Zhang Feng as powerful as the rumors say? How does he look? Also, why did he come to Jiangnan?" The black shadow cupped his hands and said in a low voice, "Young master, that Zhang Feng looks like an ordinary person and is quite handsome. As for his purpose, it seems to be for a woman. A woman? Gao Ming frowned. He had heard that Zhang Feng was a very rich man and had an official title in the imperial court. His business was also very big. How could such a person come to Jiangnan to take risks for a woman? But on second thought, this Zhang Feng seemed to be a scholar. Since ancient times, scholars were affectionate. It was possible that he would do something for a woman. Thinking about it, he could only ask, "Have you found out who Zhang Feng's woman is?" The Black Shadow frowned and paused for a long time before saying, "I only heard this Zhang Feng say that the woman is called Yu. I don't know anything else." Yu? Gao Ming frowned. In Jiangnan, there were many women called Yu. How would he know who it was? However, a person like Zhang Feng wouldn't take a fancy to some common cosmetics, right? She should be from some noble family, right? He began to ponder. Suddenly, he thought of something. Yuqiyu? Could it be her? Yuqiyu had always been in Jiangnan and rarely went out. She basically had no chance to get to know Zhang Feng. Could it be the Zhao clan's Yu? If it was a girl from the Zhao family, Zhang Feng wouldn't be easy to deal with. No, he had to make a trip to the Zhao clan in a few days to clarify this matter so that the Zhao clan wouldn't misunderstand. After all, the Li family of Longxi stood behind the Zhao family, which was a royal bloodline. It was not easy to provoke them. After thinking for a while, he looked at the Black Shadow and continued to ask, "Did Zhang Feng say what he plans to do next?" The Shadow nodded. Zhang Feng said he wants to buy paper, and this paper is better than Xian paper. Gao Ming frowned, feeling that something was wrong. Xian paper was recognized as the best paper in the world. How could Zhang Feng have the guts to say that it was better than Xian paper? Could it be that this guy wanted to play to the gallery? It shouldn't be. Moreover, a person who ran such a big business shouldn't be so stupid. Could it be that this guy really had better paper than Xian paper? For a moment, he was a little suspicious. Did you hear wrongly just now? Did Zhang Feng really say that it's better than Xian paper? The Black Shadow nodded solemnly. This time, Gao Ming was even more confused. He knew that the guy in front of him wouldn't lie to him. However, he couldn't believe that Zhang Feng had better paper than Xian paper. Combined with the information he knew about Zhang Feng, he also knew that the other party was not stupid. He probably wouldn't do anything stupid, so there was only one possibility. This guy really had something. Thinking of this, he looked at the Shadow and said solemnly, "Do you know when he'll start selling?" "Tomorrow," the Shadow said firmly. "Good." Gao Ming slapped the table and narrowed his eyes. Since this guy is going to sell tomorrow, tonight is the time to do it. You immediately inform all the businesses that they are not allowed to sell their houses to Zhang Feng. Otherwise, they will be going against my Gao family. The Shadow nodded, turned around, and ran out of the door. Suddenly, the room became much quieter. After a long time, Gao Ming glanced outside the door and sneered. "Zhang Feng, although I haven't seen you yet, the war between us has started. I was very happy that you made a vow, but when I heard that you want to deal with the 7 families, I can't sit back and do nothing. This time, I want to see how powerful this rumored person is." The sneer was especially arrogant and breathtaking, floating in the entire room. This night seemed to be unusually noisy. The doors of many shops on the street were knocked on. First, they were stopped by a group of black-clothed men to warn them. Some of them were stubborn and didn't want to agree to anything, so they were beaten up. In the end, they still agreed to some conditions. The black-clothed men didn't leave until all the shops on the street were knocked on. Then, they were greeted with waves of abuse. However, these abuses were like mosquitoes. They seemed to be afraid of something. Chapter 2089. Soon, the night passed and the sun rose high in the sky. Zhang Feng stretched his body and walked out of the room. Just as he was about to eat breakfast, something bumped into him. Damn it, who doesn't have eyes? He cursed and was about to teach the person a lesson when he realized it was Yu Baoqing. He was even angrier. "Baoqing, are you King blind? Watch where you're going." Yuqi Baoqing scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, Fengzi. I wasn't paying attention." As he spoke, he seemed to remember something and his expression changed. "Fengzi, something happened." Old Jia and the others are waiting for you in the hall. Zhang Feng frowned and felt that something was wrong. He turned and walked toward the hall. As soon as he entered, Jia Daoren came up to him. Master, something happened? I went out to buy a house this morning, but no one was willing to buy. How could this be? Zhang Feng's expression darkened. I don't know. Jia Daoren frowned and paced around. I saw that no one was buying and thought that I was underpaying. I doubled the price, but no one was willing to buy. Master, what should I do? Don't panic. Zhang Feng waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to panic. Then he seemed to think of something and quickly said, Old Jia, did you offend someone in Jiangnan? Otherwise, why didn't they buy? How could I have offended someone? Jia Daoren said without hesitation. Then he paused and said, Master, even if I did offend someone, they wouldn't be a threat. It's impossible that so many merchants wouldn't buy. Zhang Feng took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, even if old Jia had offended someone, he couldn't have controlled all the merchants immediately. Besides, why was it that old Jia was fine before, but now the merchants were unified? There was only one possibility left. It had something to do with him? Did he offend someone? That was impossible. He had just arrived in Jiangnan and hadn't had time. Oh no, it was the Gao family. He finally figured it out and quickly said, Old Jia, it must be the Gao family. The Gao clan? Jia Daoren glanced in the direction of the Gao residence and felt that it wasn't quite possible. He asked, even if you offended the Gao family, they wouldn't know about our relationship. Moreover, we only discussed buying paper yesterday. How would they know? Zhang Feng nodded, thinking that it made sense. But soon he came to his senses. The Gao family was powerful, so wouldn't it be easy for them to find her? Besides, the guards had been on the road all night yesterday. Perhaps they had let down their guard and let these dogs slip in? All of these were possible. However, it was no longer important to know this now. With a heavy expression, he asked, Old merchant, is there any other way to buy a house? Jia Daoren shook his head. I'm afraid not anymore. Once the Gao family gets involved, no one else will dare to buy a house unless what? A glimmer of hope flashed across Zhang Feng's face. Jia Daoren looked deeply at Zhang Feng with a heavy expression. Unless you look for the Yang family. Only they would dare to go against the Gao family. Zhang Feng frowned. Although he wanted to build a good relationship with the Yang family, he didn't plan to look for them. Just as he was about to ask if there was any other way, Jia Daoren spoke again. Apart from the Yang family, there are only the other 6 families. Zhang Feng sighed. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? The 7 families all wore the same pants. How could they go against the Gao family? They might as well look for the Yang family. That was what he thought, but he didn't plan to do so yet. He remembered that the old scholar had given him a slip of paper with some important information written on it. He looked at Jia Daoren and asked seriously, Old merchant, do you know the Wang family? The Wang family? Jia Daoren frowned. He raised his head as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he said, There aren't many Wangs in Jiangnan. Master, are you talking about the Wang family by the canal? Zhang Feng nodded. That's the Wang family. What kind of power do they belong to? What is their position in Jiangnan? Jia Daoren shook his head and sighed. The Wang family is quite pitiful. They were aristocrats in the Sui dynasty and were prominent in Jiangnan for a period of time. They basically monopolized 1/10 of Jiangnan's industry until His Majesty ascended to the throne. The Wang family's power slowly declined and was swallowed up by the 7 families. Now, they only have one industry left. I'm not sure what it is exactly. As for their power, they seem to have joined the Yang family. However, this happened a while ago, so the Wang family's power isn't very strong. Master, do you know the Wang family? Zhang Feng nodded slightly. Previously, an elder told me to look for the Wang family if I were in trouble. I didn't expect the Wang family to be in such dire straits. However, it seems that there is no other way. After thinking for a while, he seemed to have made a decision. Prepare the horse. Since I'm already in Jiangnan, I'll go take a look. Even if I can't help much, I'll just take it as a junior going to visit the elders. Chapter 2090. The Wang family was acquainted with the old scholar, so it was only right for him to address him as an elder. Seeing that Zhang Feng had made his decision, Jia Daoren did not say anything more. He nodded and said, "Master, how many people are you going to bring? After all, this is Jiangnan, so we have to be careful." Zhang Feng glanced at the guards and asked hesitantly, "Where are Gao Can, Hao Chujun, and the others?" "They all went out to look for a house. When Gao Can heard that no one would buy it for us, he almost went to the county office. If Hao Chujun had not stopped him, the county office would have been in a mess." Jia Daoren thought of what had just happened and smiled bitterly. That old man is too dishonest, and he even wants Chujun. What's the use of going to the county office for this kind of thing? He's brainless. Zhang Feng couldn't help but curse inwardly. After letting out a long breath, he turned to Yu Baoqing and said, "Baoqing, take 10 guards with you and come with me." Yu Baoqing nodded and went to the yard to get the guards. "Master, will 10 people be enough?" Jia Daoren asked worriedly. "What are you afraid of?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and said carelessly, "Gao Can still has the commander's seal. Although he can't mobilize the troops, it's enough to keep Jiangnan under control. Who dares to touch me? Let's go." With that, he turned and walked out of the door. He boarded the carriage and drove to the canal street. After a while, the horse neighed and the carriage slowly came to a stop. "Fengzi, we've arrived at the place you said." Yuchi Baoqing's voice came from outside the carriage. Zhang Feng answered casually and stepped out of the carriage. As soon as he got out, he saw a huge mansion. Although the mansion was big, it was slightly dilapidated. There were obvious cracks on the stone lion at the door, and the paint on the pillars had fallen off because of old age. There were even obvious marks on the door. At first glance, it looked like a down-and-out mansion. If Zhang Feng had not seen the huge plaque with the words, "Prince's Mansion," written on it, he would have suspected that he had come to the wrong place. "Baoqing, are you sure we're not at the wrong place?" Zhang Feng looked at the plaque and asked suspiciously. Yuchi Baoqing scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. "Fengzi, I came here according to the address you gave me. What's wrong with that?" Zhang Feng let out a long sigh. It seemed that he had overestimated the prince's mansion. Such a dilapidated mansion, he was afraid that it had been built for a long time. "Let's go in and take a look." He waved his hand, gesturing for them to enter. As he spoke, he strode towards the manor. As soon as he stepped on the stairs, a shout came, "Who's there?" "Stop." Zhang Feng was stunned. He stopped and took a closer look. It turned out that 2 men dressed in servants' clothing had rushed out. He smiled and said, "I'm here to pay a visit to your master." "Pay a visit to master?" The 2 servants looked at each other. The leader stepped forward and asked in surprise, "Which family are you from? What business do you have with my master?" Zhang Feng could not help but smile bitterly. Wasn't this servant too cautious? It seemed that he was often bullied by the clan. He smiled and expressed his goodwill. "I'm an old friend of your master. You can go ahead and report that Mr. Zihuai asked me to come." The leader of the servants narrowed his eyes and carefully examined Zhang Feng. Then, he turned to the other servant and whispered something to him. Then he rushed into the manor. After about half an hour, the servant walked out. However, he was no longer as cautious as before. He was full of smiles. "So it's an esteemed guest. I didn't know that I had offended you. I'm really sorry. Please follow me." Zhang Feng smiled and did not intend to make a fuss. After all, the Wang clan was already in dire straits. It was not wrong to be cautious. He waved his hand and indicated for Yuchi Baolin to follow closely behind him. Then, he followed the servant into the manor. As soon as he entered, he saw a large pond. There were many koi fish and lotus flowers in the pond. There were many fake mountains above the pond. In addition to some flowing water, it was like a landscape painting. It could be seen that the owner of this manor was a person who cultivated his character. Walking further in, there was a long corridor with dozens of pillars standing in great numbers. There were many flowers, birds, fish, and insects carved on them. However, the exquisite carvings had been eroded by time. Many of the lifelike animals could no longer be seen clearly. After passing through the corridor, a large hall came into view. The pillars supporting the hall were the same as the pillars in the corridor. They were dilapidated. "Young master, my master is in the hall. Please enter on your own. I'll go make tea for you." The servant bowed and said. Zhang Feng did not reply. He only nodded slightly. Then he strode into the hall. The hall looked very spacious. It was even larger than the Zhang manor. However, it was empty. There were many tables with flowers, porcelain, and other decorations. There was even some light dust on them. Chapter 2091. It wasn't hard to imagine how grand the Wang residence used to be, but now it was deserted. Zhang Feng looked around and saw two figures by the window. One seemed to be a man, sitting cross-legged, and the other was a servant girl, standing respectfully at the side. Seeing this, he hurried forward. "May I ask if you are the Wang residence's old master, Wang Shi?" As he spoke, he glanced at the man and saw that he was about 40 years old. He had a long hair bun and his face was full of wrinkles. He looked kind, but his eyes were tightly closed, making him look mysterious. He was wearing a discolored brocade robe. It must have changed color because it had been washed many times. After a moment, the man lazily opened his eyes and glanced at Zhang Feng. "Who are you? Why do you say you know Zihuai? What are your intentions in coming to the Wang residence?" Zhang Feng smiled bitterly. After all this time, the old man was still suspicious of him? He was too damn cautious. Just how badly had he been harmed? He shook his head and smiled. "Master Wang, my name is Zhang Feng. I am half a disciple of Master Zihuai. As for coming to the Wang residence, it was on Master Zihuai's orders to pay a visit." As he spoke, he waved at Yuchi Baoqing, indicating for him to bring the gift. The old man was too wary now. It was better to build a good relationship with him first before asking for help. Besides, the old man still didn't believe that he was Master Zihuai's disciple. Perhaps the gift would lower his guard. This method seemed to have some effect. The servant girl opened the gift box and placed it in front of the old man. The old man glanced at it, and a glint flashed in his eyes. However, it quickly disappeared. He smiled faintly. The things you gave were worthless things in the old man's eyes. They were not presentable at all. Zhang Feng rubbed his nose and smiled awkwardly. He knew that the Wang residence used to belong to the first-class nobility. However, now that it had fallen, he still wanted to take advantage of it. Just as he was about to reply, the old man spoke. "Little child, for the sake of your gift, this old man will temporarily believe that you are Zihuai's disciple. First, tell me what Zihuai looks like. Also, do you have any proof?" After all this time, he still didn't believe it. Zhang Feng laughed bitterly in his heart, but he still put on a smile on his face. Mr. Zihuai is now in Chang'an. He's about 50 years old, and his face is full of wrinkles. "Oh right, there's also Mr. Zihuai's handwriting here." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his waist and handed it over. The old man's expression changed. He quickly took it and looked at it seriously. She laughed excitedly at first, but then she felt sad. She pinched the note and said sadly, "Zihuai, you didn't listen to me back then. Now, sigh." He let out a long sigh. Then, as if he had thought of something, he quickly got up and said to Zhang Feng with a smile, "Nephew Zhang, please forgive me for what happened just now. I really had no choice." As he spoke, he looked at the maidservant at the side and hurriedly said, "Quickly go and brew the tea. Remember, after brewing the tea, take out my precious Da Hong Pao. Since we have an esteemed guest today, we must bring out the best." The maidservant nodded and ran out with small steps. She seemed to be happy because her master was happy. "Nephew, come sit." Wang Shi pulled Zhang Feng over. His vigorous footsteps didn't seem like an old man at all. "Come, nephew, sit. The good tea will be served soon." Zhang Feng didn't react for a moment. He didn't expect that the old man, who had been cold and indifferent just a moment ago, would suddenly change his attitude. It seemed that part of it was still thanks to that note. He smiled. "Uncle Wang is too polite. Although I'm half a disciple of Mr. Zihuai, Uncle doesn't have to treat me so well." Since it was the first time they met, he still had to be polite. This was something he had learned in his 2 lives. More importantly, Wang Shi's attitude had changed so quickly that he was still not used to it. However, Wang Shi acted as if they were close friends. He waved his hand and said carelessly, "Ah, you don't have to be so polite. Back in the days, Old Man and Zihuai were like brothers. When we were in private school, we ate the same bowl of rice, slept on the same bed, and read the same book. Later on, when we were successful in our studies, we would write poems and drink wine in the bamboo forest. It was very comfortable. His disciple is the old man's disciple." Hearing this, Zhang Feng felt reassured. This old scholar and Wang Shi had a good relationship, so he should be able to help him. However, with this house in such dire straits, how could he still have a say in Jiangnan? This was the Gao family, not just anyone could go against them, let alone a family in dire straits. For a moment, he didn't even want to trouble this old man he had just met. Looking at the relationship between Wang Shi and the old scholar, if he asked, Wang Shi would do his best to get it done. He was worried that he would drag the Wang family down with him. While he was in a daze, Wang Shi spoke again. "Nephew, how is Zihuai doing in Chang'an?" Zhang Feng cupped his hands and smiled. "Uncle Wang, you don't have to worry. Mr. Zihuai is working as a teacher in a school in Chang'an. He doesn't have to worry about food or clothing." Chapter 2092. Wang Shi nodded with relief. "Although I was lonely in the first half of my life, now I have a good home. Teacher, not bad." While they were talking, the maid came in with a wooden plate. There were all kinds of ingredients on it, including scallions, ginger, dates, orange peel, mint, coarse salt, mutton oil, and so on. Zhang Feng was shocked. When he first came to the Tang dynasty, he drank this kind of thing. Once the tea was boiled and all kinds of ingredients were put in, the taste, it was like going to heaven. Fortunately, green tea had been popularized in Chang'an, but Jiangnan was still using the same method. How could he drink it? While he was worried, he seemed to see a business opportunity. People in Jiangnan loved tea. If he sold green tea, would it steal a wave of business? He could also open a tea workshop in Jiangnan. After all, the tea here was famous in the country. While daydreaming, he turned to look at Wang Shi. "Uncle, how's the tea business in Jiangnan? Which family is selling it now?" Wang Shi smiled bitterly. "In the past, my Wang residents also dabbled in the way of tea, but we gave up after our family declined. Now it's the Wu clan that's selling it. Other clans are also dabbling in it, but the Wu clan's business is the largest." "The Wu family? The branch of the Zheng family in Xinjiang?" Zhang Feng's eyes turned, thinking about how to enter the tea business. At this time, a burst of pungent smell came. He frowned. He saw Wang Shi smash the tea bricks, boil them with water, and put in all the ingredients, such as scallions, vinegar, ginger, dates, orange peel, mint, coarse salt, mutton oil, and so on. Zhang Feng subconsciously covered his nose, but felt that it was inappropriate. He put down his hand and smiled awkwardly. "Uncle, you," Wang Shi smiled, poured a cup of green liquid and handed it to Zhang Feng. "Nephew, this is Jiangnan's De Hong Pao after the rain. The old man has been collecting it for more than 10 years. Usually, he is only willing to take out a little of it when guests come. This time, it's specially for you." Zhang Feng took the teacup and smiled. "Thank you for your hospitality, uncle. I'm really flattered." "You're welcome. Come have some tea." Wang Shi smiled. He picked up the teacup and tasted it carefully. He even let out a faint chuckle as he reminisced about the aftertaste. "This is really good tea." After saying that, he glanced at Zhang Feng. "Hey, nephew, why aren't you drinking?" Zhang Feng's face was bitter. He really wanted to say, "How am I supposed to drink this thing?" However, he couldn't say this out loud. He could only pick up the teacup and take a sip. Imitating Wang Shi, he smiled faintly and said, "Good tea. Uncle's tea is truly memorable." When Wang Shi heard this, he seemed to be very satisfied. He stroked his white beard and said, "Nephew, it's not that this old man is bragging, but this De Hong Pao is something that can't be bought with money. Not even gold can be exchanged for it." "Not even for gold?" Zhang Feng frowned. Was the price of tea in Jiangnan already sky-high? If he could take out tea leaves that were even better than De Hong Pao, he might be able to gain a foothold in the Jiangnan tea ceremony. Most importantly, this Wang Shi seemed to know a lot about the tea ceremony. Perhaps he could help him? Thinking about this, he asked modestly, Uncle, I've just arrived in Chang'an. I still don't know how the tea ceremony business in Chang'an is like. Please give me some advice. Hearing this, Wang Shi seemed to be greatly satisfied. He smiled proudly and said, "Nephew, if this old man dares to say he's second in the tea ceremony business in Chang'an, no one dares to say they're first." In the beginning, the tea ceremony business in Chang'an was controlled by our Wang family. Longjing, Dahong Pao, Biluakun, and other good teas all had to go through our hands. At this point, he lowered his eyebrows and let out a long sigh. Unfortunately, in the end, the Wang family declined, and the tea business was also taken over by various forces. Now, the Wang family is only relying on some inferior tea leaves to make a living, while the tea business in Jiangnan has been taken over by various big families. Among them, the Wu family is the most tyrannical. They have the Zheng family behind them, so ordinary families don't dare to do anything to them. The other 6 families also have their own businesses, so they don't care. As a result, the Wu family is getting bigger and bigger, and the tea business in Jiangnan is getting better and better. The price of good tea leaves is so high that it's hard to get even with thousands of gold coins. Not to mention the inferior tea leaves, but ordinary people can't drink it. Zhang Feng nodded and had a sense of propriety in his heart. Uncle, if we import tea leaves from other places and sell them in Jiangnan, will it work? Although he was now ready to start selling rice paper, since Wang Shi had tea ceremony resources, he still wanted to make use of it. Thinking of this, Wang Shi shook his head with a wry smile. Nephew, your idea is a bit simple. Not to mention how you're going to sell in Jiangnan, just delivering the goods is a troublesome matter. Zhang Feng waved his hand and smiled faintly. Uncle, don't worry. I have a way. Can you just tell me how to open the market in Jiangnan? Oh, you have a way? Wang Shi's eyes widened in disbelief.